And
we're live. Hello and welcome to the 133rd episode of Game Theory Gang. I'm Matty Allen with ChrispyMan of Hexfire.io, Fast Abdul, and our guest tonight, Zenith. Welcome.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, one quick check. Oh, now it went live. Now it says live for me. It didn't say live for all that time. Welcome. Thank you for joining us, Matty.
Yeah. Hit the like and subscribe button. Share this out. We got a great episode for you tonight. We're going to be wishing Richard Hart a happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Should we sing? We can get everybody to sing everywhere on every continent. How about that?
Let's go.
We'll sing happy birthday.
Which Hex song should we sing for Richard? So fun fact. All right. So I know you guys maybe don't have every Hex song ever memorized, but fun fact, I created a website called hexcds.com, hexcds.com. And if I remembered to renew the domain, it'll take you to a playlist called, now that's what I call Hex Volume 1, which has, I think, 30 songs that are about Hex.
Well, somebody just went and got that domain if you don't have it up to date. So
yeah, it's still good.
All right.
I think CDs would have been great because certificates of deposit.
That's also a good one.
You caught that.
That's good. Hey, you want to hear my what I'm upset about this week? Let's start there.
Tell me.
We rest in peace 2039 Poseidon. Bam, bam, bam. So we had a Poseidon, but so many people are staking Quattro Cinco. He was unable to maintain his 10%, his or her, and now less than 10% of the T-shares. So we may end 2039 without a Poseidon for 2000.
Another week left on that?
Yeah, give or take. A little bit less than that, but
I have to admit, ChrispyMan, when I was listening to your live stream where you mentioned that earlier this week on your channel, Hexfire.io. Yes. I laughed out loud when you were like, I don't know what we're supposed to do. Take away his trident or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
You made some joke and it was funny.
How do you demote somebody, right? I don't know.
I would speak very highly of anybody who's staking in 2039, whether you're a shy shrimp or a dabbing dolphin.
Let me tell you, when the price was dabbing, I usually put dabbling by mistake. When prices were 20% what they were now, I was like, this is a fantastic idea to do Quattro Cincos. And then I looked at the dollar value after 5x. I'm like, what the hell am I thinking? But here's the thing, right? Because it's Hex and it's a long-term off play, asymmetrical. And so for the people who are going to be out there, they're going to earn an awful lot of Hex rewards. That's all. So
the power of compound interest compels us, right?
The power of compound interest compels you. Leave Matty's body now. Leave. Yes.
Well,
so yeah. So I know I said I was going to talk about Hex throughout, so I will keep talking about it. But Quattro Cinco, baby.
It's welcome. Yeah.
What about the Maximus DAO contracts? Do you know how big of holders they are? Like Maxi token is a 15-year stake. Like, how, is that a Poseidon? Is it a whale?
Well, I don't know if they'll make a difference in what they do. No, it's not a Poseidon. No, not at all. In fact, I'm not sure. I can actually check while we're on stream. They might be in shark territory. Overall, somebody will answer here. There are a lot of followers.
So I'm glad you asked about Deci, one of my favorite tokens.
That's not what he asked about, but thank you for bringing it up. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was the Maximus.
That is a Maximus DAO token. So yeah, I'm talking about Maxi. That's the 15-year stake in particular.
We know where your heart lies, Matt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Deci's cool too.
Sorry, selective hearing. My bad. To be honest, I woke up really early this morning because I came out here to Salt Lake City to tell people about Hex and PulseChain at the Ethereum conference here. So But yeah, 72,500 T shares is the DESI contract.
75,000.
That would be
I'll tell you in a moment. I'll look it up.
Just shy of a whale, right?
You guys entertain yourselves. Yeah, just
upper shark. I think you need 90,000.
Yeah, because you need 90,000. Yeah, to be a whale. So that's pretty good. But sadly, none of the Maximus DAO currently has exposure to 2039, which maybe somebody should think about, right? Maybe
pool party.
Maybe, I don't know.
The pool party, don't they?
Yeah, they do. But we're getting up there because we're over 34,000 now T-shirts. Maddie, I know you're going to ask that next, and in another week from now, maybe I'm talking about 2040 T-shirts.
I wonder if the had been Poseidon will be listening or watching or hear through the grapevine and try to make a play in the next week to reclaim.
I hope so. I hope so.
Spot.
Yeah. Hey, listen, it is a vanity benchmark. I mean, 9.83% or whatever is pretty big. Hey, I don't have 9.83% of anything, right? So, I think that's a pretty big number, and so nothing. But you know how nothing to be ashamed of course. You know how people are,
yeah,
right? So
I heard that
he might want it.
I heard that in 2039, HBO will be revealing the identity of
Richard Hart, or the OA. Yeah. Richard Hart is really Richard. Oh.
They got into some trouble because they're releasing a Bitcoin documentary, and they claimed that they know who Satoshi is, and that got all the Bitcoiners on Twitter. So.
Well, here's the thing from my perspective. They named another dead guy, so with no, apparently no access to keys, right? So
it was really effective, marketing. I
read
my hat to them.
Yep, I saw him. I was like, what? Who is Satoshi? Because I'm always expecting that it actually will be Richard Hart, but
do we want to go around the room and give our guess as to who Satoshi is?
Naming a dead person is not a bad option. Because it's like they're not there to rebut it, so it's sure, whatever goes, man. Yeah. I mean, as far as the realistic answer, it's like I have no idea, man. Although I have seen, I gotta find this video at some point, but I did see somebody talking about how it was back in the late 80s. I want to say the NSA created this white paper about some sort of decentralized currency through connected computers, and then the author of that white paper was another Asian sounding name that sounded very similar to Satoshi Nakamoto. So there was some tinfoil hat speculation that it's all just an NSA ploy, because wouldn't the government want you to have all your public transactions be visible?
Can I make up a story for you sometime? I have this whole
good question.
That's crazy, But I'm with you, Steve. Maybe it was. Along those lines, if you think about this, if somebody really had a grip on planning ahead, and this is totally fake, guys. I'm not saying this is true, but the scenario would be, what if some state player decided they were going to do that, and then they created a new digital token or coin.
USDC.
They cornered the market on the token early, or coin, and then inflated their currency to oblivion. How about that?
And the US dollar inflation.
Yeah, bug. And then at the end, big reveal. we have all the Bitcoin. I don't know. That's obviously not happening that way. But I mean, what a fantasy story that would be, right?
It's not the craziest idea I've ever heard on that one.
Well, I've certainly seen real life things that have been crazier than that. Yeah.
The game theory of who is Satoshi, I think, is an important thing to Bitcoiners. It's got speculative stickiness. It's is it Kleinman? Was Jihan Wu and the other guy, were they trying to crack the hard drive that they stole from David Kleinman's widow? Is it Adam Back, who invented an early version of smart contracts?
Is a
Question
Zabo.
mark?
Don't know.
Yeah.
Or
sorry. That's who I meant. Yeah.
Or it's really Elon, who apparently is not from Earth, right? Because he's, I mean,
Polymarket give that less than 1%, but he did make the list.
He's on the list. He's on the list,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I've often thought about that. I mean, this guy was originally in the PayPal, right?
PayPal Mafia.
You know, and that, yeah, PayPal Mafia, and of course, there's the conspiracy theory of XRP. I don't know if they're actually called validators, but nodes in space, and the connection with X, and the connection with. I mean, there's some conspiracy stuff out there, you know.
I think one of the more likely answers is probably really boring, but it's probably a group of people, like an actual team that got together and built it, which is going to be very depressing because there's not like that one front man that you can just be like, that's the rock star. It's like, no, because if I remember correctly, there's a handful of Satoshi wallets. So if there's multiple wallets, it kind of makes sense that multiple people might have control of them. So
maybe, but hey, Satoshi, you know, the story-wise, how this all went down, he actually sounds like one of us, right? Or in the beginning, brilliant, and much more brilliant than I don't claim to be that smart, right? But I mean, pretty brilliant in the approach, right? And so I think it's more lone wolf likely, and from yeah, I don't know, from a storytelling perspective, I like the idea that it's
Hal Finney.
Yeah, I like that idea. You know, it's kind of fun. But you're right, Zenith, right? Because they really, as always, right? People put these images on a pedestal, and so they have this belief that this is this hugely, you know, benevolent benefactor, this person, and alive or dead, and it does not fit the narrative, you know, that it's the NSA or somebody else. Yeah, not mainstream narrative, you know, or some group of people, or it was by accident, or it was some guy, you know, just screwing around, right?
It's probably like an autistic guy with his own interest that didn't involve making money. And, you know, whether he's dead or not, like it's impossible to predict his actions as far as what he's interested in. If he's interested in being rich, well, he could have done that many, many times, right? If he's interested in being famous, he could have done that many, many times. So, but he didn't do that. So either he's dead or he thinks differently and doesn't care about those things.
Yeah, 100%. Well, you know, and you know, obviously there were some people that claimed to be a Satoshi along the way. You know, like, you know, well, a variety of people who did claim for their own benefit. But I think as a Bitcoiner earlier, and I was looking at it and thinking about it, I was thinking, you know, it's very, very, it's very, very positive that those tokens have never moved, right? Or those coins have never moved in his wallets. But just think about what that would do if they ever moved, if you ever even saw an inkling that those wallets were taking action. That would like be the equivalent of tearing everything down. You know, people go nuts over that.
People might go nuts over it, but theoretically, one of the main issues is that the Satoshi wallets have just such a large portion of the market that it's the question of like Mark Zuckerberg trying to sell Facebook stock to recuperate some sort of cash for a project. It's like the fact that the founder is such it's the founder dumping. So why is the founder dumping? That'll get everyone scared. But B, they also have just such a large percentage that they have the ability to really have those price fluctuations too. So, I mean, if they do it smartly, they do very small increments, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's 5%, yeah, which is way less than the OA, but like it started out that Satoshi had the first million original pre-mine before there was such a thing.
Doesn't a lot of this sound like it rhymes with hex?
I think anybody who held from any super low amount in crypto, like after you get above a 10,000x, is like an incredibly unique human and like has has a superpower. And you know, a lot of people are familiar with like Richard Hart's hundreds of hours of content and his story of, you know, holding in Bitcoin when it went from whatever it was, like, you know, $10 down to $2 or something, and then all the way up to tens of thousands. So then you've got the God whale. I did a deep dive doing chain analysis and finding that the God whale in Hex did in fact buy Ethereum for 30 cents each. Like,
bravo.
And still has what? Over 100,000 ETH. Incredible. It's wild.
Well, think about that too. Investment wise, you said he has 100,000 ETH now.
Other people are like more up to speed with like the total amount.
Let's just guess and say it's 100,000, right? That would have been that at 30 cents. What kind of a purchase is that? $30,000.
I think it was over $500 million like in 2021.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as what was the purchase price, the cost basis, and the cost basis would have been $30K, and so that's a pretty big investment to be putting into something new, right?
Yeah,
it just came out, and and so a lot of times, because I'll do this, I'll just apply it to myself. I'll be like, I could have done that, but would I have really? In 2016 or 2017, taken $30,000 and done that? No, I would not have done that. Right. Of course, that's why I'm sitting here talking to you, and I'm not Godwell. But
the answer to that is it depends on the size of the player initially. Because I mean, obviously, for each of us, it's gonna be we all have like in our head like what that scratcher bet size is. For some people, it can be that $10,000 range. That's chump change to them. But for other people, it might be 100,000, 5,000.
That is less surprising to me than like the fact that somebody could hold through, whatever 100,000 X or something, like what, yeah, whatever it is, because it went from 30 cents to $4,500.
That's kind of like broke people thinking too, right? Because that kind of ignores everything that goes along with that kind of a trip. So if you kind of like think of it the way Zenith was saying, and it was a good chunk of change, the person probably didn't YOLO that, right? Probably, maybe they did, right? But in the situation where you didn't YOLO, and then you see it grow in such wealth, why would you cook the golden goose? Why would you cook that? Even after the 10,000X, right? It's a different frame of mind. If I'm coming at it from, I don't know how to pay my bills, I'm selling everything, right? Because I need to pay my bills. But if you're looking at it from, you got a big stack of cash or a stack of crypto, why would you move the price against you? Why would you take yourself out of the game? Because you can never reclaim that.
We got people right now who are selling Hex and PulseChain and PulseX and Inc. And they had Genesis prices. They had all-time low prices. And if I look on chain at how many people have 100,000 ETH still, that started at 30 cents, it's rare and it's admirable. And shout out to Godwell for like donating to the Hex and PulseChain badges. Cause that it really impresses me. And it kind of like comes up with this whole discussion of happy birthday, Richard, and people who are delaying gratification and who is Satoshi. I remember I asked Richard once, like, about a Satoshi theory, and I wish I could find the old stream. I think it was on one of Hexologist's 24-hour streams. But yeah, I was like really convinced for a little while it was Paul LaRue, who was like a kingpin.
He's still in jail, right? No.
Yeah. And there were some things that lined up, like he had like developed some forms of encryption that allowed his criminal enterprise to go on, and like so he basically had like a motive to create a new financial system and stuff, or at least try to. And he got locked up, around the time that Satoshi died. But then again, there's lots of clues of like when Satoshi went offline is like when people died or got locked up or like just peace out. But yeah, I remember Richard saying like, oh, it's not him and it's not me. So there you go. But it's somebody solved the Byzantine general's problem.
Well, just to be clear, I'm neither Godwill nor Satoshi. Just in case anybody was thinking that.
I had my doubts.
No, I bet you did. I bet you did. But I think you're right. I agree with you, Maddie, that it is very admirable to be able to hold that long. And relating it over to both Hex and PulseChain, we see the same types of things happening now. This is how, this is why you can go back and find old posts about Bitcoin, from 2013 or 11 or 14 or whatever, people, talking about how wonderful it was to realize the $1 price, this price, that price, because in general, people will not hold forever. They get kind of a little bit of price bias. Just like when we were coming into those types of assets. If you came into crypto early enough, you were looking at like, I'm not going to buy it at $10. That doesn't make any sense. It used to be pennies, right? And then you're like,
Yes.
well, I'm not going to buy it at 1,000. It used to be hundreds. Or if you did have it, you're like, there's no way. Like, I mean, how many people would have been like, there's no way it was going to go to $68,000, right? And here's this guy selling the Bitcoin. Right?
I'm showing on screen Greg Schoen, who's the most memed Bitcoiner of all time when it comes to like selling and thinking he missed the boat. And Greg follows me on Twitter, by the way. Shout out. But
I sure hope he got back in.
Well, no, he didn't. I spoke to him in 21, and he was selling NFTs of this tweet. Because he was still working his programming job.
Yeah.
Because he and the tweet, for those who are just listening, is from May 16th, 2011. I wish I had kept my 1700 BTC at 6 cents instead of selling them at 30 cents now that they're $8. So he was thinking he missed out. And for those of you keeping track, I already did the math a long time ago. He started with $100 and he sold on a 5x. So he made $400. And I ended up doing an analysis of like what would have happened if he dollar cost averaged out monthly. And at the time that I did that in 2022, he would have still had half of his net worth in Bitcoin. He would have cashed out like 10 million and still had 10 million in Bitcoin.
It was only about 15 years, right? So, I mean, well, I'm rounding, but that would be worth about 110 million today, right? And so one thing, I guess one footnote for that, hodl bag.
Well, and
you don't need to get rid of everything. Even if you think, keep a small portion of it, you could do that. You don't have to get out of everything 100%.
And, Satoshi or somebody early on put a time locking function in Bitcoin, but Bitcoiners never popularized it, right? And so that's where Hex enters the scene and becomes the better Bitcoin. So,
did you know that Hex was built with Bitcoin in mind to be a better Bitcoin?
I believe it.
Yeah, it was. That was the design. How do we improve on this, right?
When people bring up this point, what do you mean it's supposed to be a better Bitcoin? Was it supposed to be something that added functionality to Bitcoin, like on the Bitcoin network, or was it just supposed to be a better version of it that people could pick up if they wanted?
Great question.
Well, I think to start with, it was a slightly different inflation profile.
Okay.
Right? So you have that, and I'm not prepared to really get too deep into it, but I think that's one of the things I would think Richard would mention, right? Because there's a lot of deliberation over the 3.69%, and that the initial inflation would be lower and overall inflation would be lower than Bitcoin, but it's definitely a different profile. And then of course the locking mechanism is there, because in the world of HODL, where you would have done well, this is even going back to 2019, you had been doing pretty well if you had kept your Bitcoin and just held it throughout, right? And so how do you improve on holding a token through over all the volatility? You lock it up to help save people from doing exactly what they do. And so I think those are probably the two primary things, is the profile of of the inflation, and then also the lockup periods. And of course, if you add in the difficulty adjustments, I posted again on Twitter about this the other day. Somebody was talking about the difficulties and increases of Bitcoin, for instance, and halvings. There was a famous podcast where Plan B, who maybe isn't held in this great favor now as it used to be, but Plan B was talking with someone, and this is the guy that came up with the stock to flow model.
Yes.
For Bitcoin, and they asked him, how would you have, if you could talk to Satoshi, what do you think he could have done to improve on Bitcoin? And the answer was have more halvings. And so, of course, I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, that's Hex, right? So it's not exactly a halvening, but Hex does multiple, multiple difficulty adjustments a day, a week, a month, and it quickens that pace of how something becomes more difficult to mine.
We could do a whole show. We could probably do a whole week of streaming about how Hex is a better Bitcoin and all the different angles there. And part of it is like from a literal technical perspective, from like a deep philosophical perspective of like, you can improve Bitcoin, technology improves. There's this Cambrian explosion of cryptos, and almost none of them have done better than Bitcoin. And so you have this really high bar that was set, and you have Richard Hart being somebody who was very much in a unique position to be a thought leader when it came to the 2017 fork of Bitcoin, where, it was a contentious fork, and like the community was split, and they were really arguing about whether Bitcoin should be upgraded or should it always stay the same. And you still see that social consensus layer being argued about today in the Bitcoin royalty and the Michael Saylors and the different thought leaders that have remained maximalist or become maximalist. But then you also have like how Sami uses a better Bitcoin as tongue-in-cheek meme that like everybody says that they're a better Bitcoin. That's been like ever since Bitcoin was created, people have been just lying and saying that they're a better Bitcoin. And the most recent one that I heard really stuck was Caspa, and I don't even know what that is, but I know it's a popular crypto that like was claiming to be a better Bitcoin. I wouldn't be surprised if Hex ends up being a better Bitcoin as like something that's both true and more mimetic, because we have a community that's time locked and is known for surviving 99% down and having all these unique characteristics. So
part of Hex being a bit better Bitcoin is that it's on better chains, right? Like Bitcoin itself is a chain, kinda, but it doesn't really work as a chain. So it's like, to me, it's kind of like a defunct gas token on like, a chain that is very, very slow. Whereas, Hex is on Ethereum, Hex is on PulseChain. They're pretty fast. It works pretty good. There's a difference there.
Yeah, and I would add in, even though I didn't say it before, is immutable. Right. So the fact that it's immutable and it's not spaghetti code, it's a couple thousand lines of really good code. It's very clear and just does what it does. I mean, I stream every week about this, almost every week. And, the last 2 or 3 years, and contract does what it says it does. I mean, people want to talk about price all the time, but and that's a whole nother aspect of it. But as far as how it works the way it was designed. It works every day. Every time we interact with it, it does the same thing over and over and over again. There's no question, about whether you're going to get the rewards that you're supposed to get or not. You get them,
That's true. When it comes to the idea of like what is a better Bitcoin, it might be a bit of a hot take here, but Bitcoin realistically is a meme coin that had a fair launch, and honestly, the only thing it has is just like the most consensus out of anything else in the space. Obviously, we also put a lot of weight behind just the blockchain network that is the Bitcoin network itself. But theoretically, at the end of the day, the tech is worse, the encryption is theoretically worse, and it's just a proof of work meme coin that people have globbed onto, and there's just that degree of consensus now about it, and it also has that track record of being so long, so that's really the value of it. It's not that it does anything, it's the first one, and it's the oldest and the longest one, and it has the most trust and recognition behind it. That's really it. I mean, everything that's come after that has pretty much been better than Bitcoin. The only thing it hasn't been better in is like market cap size and liquidity.
I mean, the price performance, almost nothing, less than 10 cryptos have ever outperformed Bitcoin in a subsequent cycle.
Again, I think that just goes back to first to the market, first, best, and biggest to the market. And it's just hard to beat that.
First mover advantage. Yep.
You guys have heard of 720p, right? So I always use that to remember, like, subtract 2 from that. Line 718 of the hex code is my favorite. It's my favorite line, that's where it says 5555. It's the only place in the hex code out of all the lines of code that says that you can leave meat on the bone for somebody else who wants to come along and delay gratification and compete with you to be the most long-term player, and to have this unique mechanism of distributing compound interest and adoption over time that even Bitcoin doesn't have in all of its glory as Hex does. So,
sure. You know what I haven't done? I haven't compared the list of current whales to the whales in the future, but my impression is, if I was, we would find that quite a few of the whales are retiring themselves by not getting T-shares in the future, which means, and Richard always said this, it's going to make new whales, right? You have this opportunity to become a whale in the Hex ecosystem. You have that opportunity.
How does one go about doing that?
On that?
What's the math on that?
Yeah. Well, what do you need to be a whale nowadays?
Well, I can tell you, I'll tell you exactly what it is. In 2039, and this is what Maddie was mentioning a moment ago about the numbers, but in 2039, to be a whale is just 340 T-shares, just 340 T-shares.
Whenever the year rolls over, which will be in about a week from now, there will be an opportunity for somebody who even stakes like 1 T-share to become like the Poseidon of like that year until everybody else gets a shot at it.
I'll challenge you for the title, man. I'm going to try to be the first Poseidon.
You should do a live stream like at the moment that it rolls over.
Yeah,
we could have like a New Year's 2040 competition. Like,
I don't think
in a week from now.
Yeah, I don't think I have the wherewithal to get 10,000 T-shares or 3,000 T-shares, or but it'd be fun for a few moments to talk about it. Yeah.
When you're talking about these levels, is there like a specific percentage of total supply, or just like pure number of hex that you're referring to?
So we're gonna have Steph on the show one of these days, and Steph, previously of Staker app and previously of Google, is one of the gigabrains in the crypto space, one of the thought leaders that came up with this system of leagues. Before Zenith, there was a informal system of calling somebody a whale if they had 1% of the supply of Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And Steph specifically applied only to Hex T-shares because he wanted people to understand the power of T-shares. And this is before RG3, Hexologist, Maddie Allen, any of these people really understood how powerful T-shares were. We all just thought, oh, Hex, let's just get Hex. And like T-shares, oh, what's that? Cool, whatever. And so Steph popularized like I hope we'll get him on to like tell the story, but he I think can even recall the moment that he came up with this idea of leagues. And this has now been adopted by Dex Screener across all cryptos.
Yeah.
To be able to, and they're using it for the liquid supply instead of the T-share amount. Crispy.
I was just going to ask Zenith, and I also shared up the list if you want to throw it up on the screen. Zenith, when did you join the community? Do you remember?
When? What do you mean by that? When did I first get
the Hex community? Yeah.
When did I get into Hex? I got into Hex probably like August 2022.
Okay, so that would explain a lot of things, right? In that, I thought you were either an excellent interviewer drawing out the right answers to questions, or you honestly wanted to know about it.
I asked because I want to know.
Yeah, because Maddie provided that. This is crazy, dude. Like you won't believe me if I tell you this. Not only and hats off to Steph for doing this. Not only did Staker leagues or this whole league kind of thing come from Hex, you know what else came from it? There was no word called tokenomics that I ever remember. There was no word called pumpamental. Nobody used those terms. Those are Richard Hart terms. I mean, how far so many of these concepts have traveled into crypto is insane. Because these are things that it'd be very common now. You pick up an article, somebody talk about pumpamentals, tokenomics. You got Ivan out there talking all about that. That didn't exist, dude. None of those terms existed. The concepts might have been there, but they weren't put to, they weren't put out there. And so much has come from the Hex community in that way. It's crazy. And of course, it's Richard really having come up with those terms. Maybe even picked them up from somebody else. I don't know. But I just remember hearing them the first time that way. Yeah. And don't even get me started on 14 pulses. We don't even need to talk about that. But I mean, there's just so many angles and things that have come out of Hex, including how to wash your hands.
They're true. By the way, what are we looking at here?
Yeah. So I threw this up on the screen for Maddie to show. You asked what
can I show a different version real quick, and we can layer in like the old with the new.
You may.
Go ahead.
Of course you can.
Go ahead and like resume your sharing, and I'll just swap them out quickly. But here's the original list that Steph shared, and I did not like. I'm not a shark. I did not highlight that. I would probably brag about it if I was. But that's the screenshot that I have is like, that's the one I was highlighting. And this is an early version where it doesn't even show turtles. So turtles wasn't a thing yet. But this is just showing that it's an order of magnitude for the percent of total shares. And so like, having 10% of the system makes you a Poseidon. Having 1% makes you a whale. A shark is a tenth of that. A dolphin's a tenth of that. A squid, so on and so forth, all the way down. I don't know. Is octopus still a thing? Squid. No, squid, turtle, crab, shrimp, shell. Yeah. And now ChrispyMan has like much more advanced ways of looking at this, different ways to like read the data.
This is super good to be able to show this because it puts more of a visual in people's minds. So it's an arbitrary number. But when I found out that I was a shrimp, I was like, I don't want to be a shrimp. I want to be a crab. And then I was like, no, I want to be a dolphin. And I was like, I can only be a turtle, But anyways, as you kind of went along, it really provided an incentive to move up at a time when there was no concept. I don't think there were some people that knew, but it wasn't me. I had no concept of just how valuable the T-shirts would be and how difficult it would be to to acquire them. And so we have up on the screen now, this is my my forecast for the end of 24. So as we go into 25, how many T-shares?
To add just another layer of context real quick, is that ChrispyMan has further applied this idea of like measuring in a certain year, which is a little bit different than the original concept of like across all the years. And so Crispy has done a really awesome, like incredible job of like focusing people on what about just in the year 2039? Like if we only looked at that year, who has 10% of the shares just in that year instead of like all the years combined? And so like when most people think about leagues over the years, they've been thinking about what their T-share count is now, and they're not even discounting that as time goes down. So like that led to a whole other analysis that Crispy and I did of like how your T-shares burn down every day, and trying to quantify that. But when we look at like, so maybe you can say, Crispy, for our auditory listeners, like you've got the breakdown for each league and for each year, and what is the context here?
Well, Maddie, I have the breakdown for each league for each year. And the context here is this: how many T-shares am I forecasting will be in existence at the end of the year? And so how many T-shares would you need to have at the end of 24 to be a Poseidon? Now, of course, these numbers will change because there's staking activity. And this is looking at the overall system. What would you need to be a Poseidon? Somewhere in the 884,000 range. If you wanted to be a whale, 88,000 range. A super shark, 8,846. Dolphin and 884 at the end of 2024. Now, again, very important to understand that the system is in use. So these numbers fluctuate all day long. They go up.
This is so cool.
I'm glad you like that. And so when you ask, what does it take, Zenith, I think initially about today, what does it take? But then I'm thinking about how do I maintain my position? And what likely outcome is that, next, if you look at Dolphin, for instance, next year you need to make sure you have 833, the year after 802 or more. The year after that into 27, 774, etc. So you can kind of keep pace. So for those of us who really are working a staking ladder, if you're attempting to preserve your T-shares, it can be kind of a benchmark of how to maintain your level of share of the inflation on a yearly basis, right? Or across your entire ladder. Now, these are forecasted numbers based on actual past use of the system, right? And so this really assumes that as we get out, and this is one of the reasons I keep talking about the Quattrocincos. This assumes we actually have about 4 million T-shares in 2039. Do we have 4 million? We do not. We do not. We have 34,000. So even though this could happen, this version could play out with a extreme increase of interest and staking, I am probably going to have to discard this soon and go with what actually has been done. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah. In the early days, like in the early years, we didn't have good prediction models for how the system would go, like how the T-shares would go down over time and what percentage of user controlled hex would be staked. And so we went from like, oh, liquid hex, cool, to like, oh, T-shares. That's your share of the future compound interest. It's your share of the future inflation of all the liquid hex that will exist. And so, so it's really valuable to have these predictions and to have this kind of data because early on we didn't have it. And so we were left kind of guessing and shooting in the dark. Whereas now it's, at least we have some idea of like how valuable a t-share can be over time, because it's going to be earning every single day through all these emergency end stakes, through like new people coming in the system and buying versus people dumping their interest or dumping altogether. So
yeah,
it's really valuable.
And to explain my comment a little bit further, Maddie, on this, and Fast and Zenith and everybody else listening, this model is based on the number of T-shares that get ended versus the number that gets started. And so it's looking at the past, what does the step down normally look like? What does the drawdown look like? How many T-shares actually burn away? So from that perspective, rolling forward, I would have expected many, many, many more T-shares to be created in 2039, but they haven't been. What's been happening is, instead of creating those T-shares in 2039, they're being created in 2024 and 25 and being rolled. Right? So that makes sense. A very similar number of T-shares are being created, but they're being created for short stakes.
So they're like compounding it, basically. They're doing a shorter stake, and then when they get the return on that stake, they stake that plus the yield that they receive to make a bigger stake, which is giving better math. Crispy, what's the play?
Well, of course, now this is a matter of perspective. I think mathematically, the longer stakes will win, right? But that's over the long term.
Even with compounding?
Yeah, even with the compounding. If you're big enough that it doesn't matter to you, and this is what we're seeing. Silver, the Antidote, had a great post that he showed me up on X over the last few days that really dove into one of these, where we've got people just rolling hundreds of millions of hex for 10 days, 20 days, 30 days. And so that's where the T-shares are being maintained rather than out. Now, over time, that they will lose their energy, but right now they're getting a ton of yield and rewards from that rolling.
Okay.
And I guess what I'm finally getting to at the end of this is, for the very long term, we have very few T-shares out there, and that it creates a asymmetrical opportunity, in my mind, for people who plan to be around for 15 years.
Fair enough.
Is there any way I can get a deal on these T-shares you speak of?
Oh, a couple of weeks ago they were less than $200, but now I don't know, man. They're like 600. They're like $600 now. Yeah, I think really it's always getting the T-shares earlier to get the best rates on it. But that's a real thing.
Well, it's either that or theoretically you go get some T-shares on a RSI auction somewhere, right?
Yeah. RSI,
try to scoop them up for the cheap.
Yeah. Well, people have done that with the Hedron auctions for sure. They got tons of them. And then, and for the people who are asking, I see a question in the chat about it, so I'll bring it up. But Yvonne was asking about the large rolling stakes. So Hex is another thing about Hex, which is really interesting to me, is that so much of this has been set in the past. So typically our greater changes in T-share rate occur because of longer stakes that experienced very, very high or higher than normal rewards or APR. And so a lot of times we think that if somebody is like a giant stake and they do it for a week, it's going to really, really affect the T-share rate, but it really doesn't. It just what it does, it helps smooth out the line, because what they'll do is they'll come in and they may, the short stakes that are very, very big, they may change the T-share rate, but it doesn't set a new high because there's not enough time for that to develop. for the cost of it, but that's probably a little more technical than we need to get into. But the system does, and again, I go over this weekly, so I could talk all day about it. So we don't want to take up too much of this stream. But the idea is they are becoming more deflationary, and and those who hold the T shares are the only ones that receive the inflation. And of course that's transposed against, I want to cycle swap. I want to, I want to call the top and sell, I want to do all these, all these strategies short term that traders will go after. It's like completely the opposite, like really go in for a very long time.
Interesting. So what I'm seeing when I look at this overall chart and all the numbers is obviously the total number of we started off with the description of each of the levels is a percentage of total supply. In this case, the supply we're looking at is T-share supply, not Hex supply, T-shares. So what I'm seeing is that the total T-share is anticipated to drop over time. I went ahead and hopped over onto hexscout.com, and they have a historical chart of the T-share supply itself. Right now, it looks like we're sitting at about 9.2 million T-shares, but the shape of the curve looks like we actually went up very steep, and then we started to do that like logarithmic thing where we started to approach a limit somewhere around 11 million T-shares. And then ever since about mid-2021, we've been on the decline slowly from about 11 million T-shares down to about 9.2 million T-shares. But along the way, there's some small fluctuations. So what are the things that can actually create or remove T-shares, and why do we have the shape of the supply graph that we have?
Great summary and question.
Yeah. I told you, I just said that a couple minutes ago, Maddie. He's like the perfect interviewer,
Totally. Yeah.
I'm just a guy trying to figure out how to make money.
Yeah. Well, hey, when you look at those numbers, first off, the numbers went high initially because it was the beginning distribution phase of Hex, and then of course we had big payday, which prompted an awful lot of T-shares, which brought us to the high for the number of T-shares that are out there. But because the T-share rate goes up and to the right over time, and the only way you can truly maintain the number of T-shares is either by locking up Hex for a longer period of time or adding more value to it, into your individual stakes, the T-shares have a deflationary effect. There's going to be a deflationary effect on the T-shares. It would require a very significant amount of new adoption of staking to make the T-shares flatten or go up, right? So then you mentioned, all right, so if it's kind of trending down, but you do have days where it goes up and down. We can actually pinpoint some of the days where it went up. The number of T-shares went up substantially to Maximus DAO. You can also pinpoint it to when the Godwill staked. There were some other releases of other protocols where you guys should actually see it pop up. But there are very few individuals that really can affect that chart, right? I mean, you need to be able to sling billions of Hex to be able to change that chart. And so what we see are just minor fluctuations up and down as these stakes, and the T-shares will disappear. And all day long, the contract keeps track of this, right? So somebody ends a stake, the count changes. They add a stake, the count changes. And it just keeps track of it over that period of time. So probably the greatest opportunity for the number of T-shares to change will be through emergency end stakes, which I don't recommend. However, some people do them, and they do change it. But that would be probably the quickest, largest way that the numbers could change. But they would go in the downward direction, not an upward, right? The other way is through additional adoption, where more people came in, something in the order of staking an additional billion Hex a month. But there's not that much Hex. I mean, I know that people who analyze it, well, yeah, but you got these billions and billions out there, but it's not available on the market for sale. So where does somebody, how would that change? You'd have to have buying pressure of additional billion per month, and somebody would have to stake it. So the two of those, it would be very difficult to do. So the stake, the T-shares will be deflationary over time unless some big shakeup occurs, which it could. right? And because I, as I pointed out with 2039, my model was saying, hey, we'd have about 3.8 million, but we don't have 3.8 million. We've got 34,000. Maybe it'll be 35,000 by the time we're done with 2039 this year and it's staked. So what does that mean for the future? It means that as T-shares disappear like this, and they're harder to recreate, both because maybe of price accumulation, but also the rate of the T-shares going up, it's less and less likely we'll ever hit 4 million in 2039. Every moment that passes, the gap gets larger, and the people who actually, again, long game, asymmetrical gains, the people actually staked in 2039 win harder and harder, because even if somebody comes in later, the longer it takes them to come in, the more unequal the rewards will be in terms of ROI. So yeah, so I keep coming back to this idea in 2039, there's a huge opportunity. Now, when the T-shares drop at this kind of rate, particularly if we do see a big emergency end staking type of event, well, what happens? Well, there's less shares. If there's less shares, the payouts are split against less T-shares or less shares. If that's the case, the payout per share or payout per T-share goes up. And so this is how the system self-regulates. So my thesis is maybe we won't get to 3 or 4 million, but at some point, if you can earn a very high APR, why wouldn't you start to consider hex staking even for short? I mean, it's 8% equivalent roughly APR on PulseChain right now for a 30-day stake. Why wouldn't you do that if it's at 10, 12, or 15%? Wouldn't people come in and do that? I mean, I know I would. I mean, if I'm coming from TradFi, I'm really excited if my broker tells me I can get 8% every year.
And if you're holding liquid hex, you're the one paying the people who are time locked, who are holding up the price of hex because they're time locked. So the system is like incredibly well balanced. It has like the deepest, best game theory of any crypto ever. And, that's why we've been able to do 201 weeks of Tuesday night shows for multiple hours every week, is because it never gets old, and it's such a dynamic, interesting system that still, people have tried to copy it and fork it and all that good kind of stuff. So yeah, it's really unique in the sense that you are paying, like in the fiat system, when they print more dollars, that's paid for by everybody who's saving in the system. But in the hex system, it would be like if the people who are doing the desirable thing, which is like saving for the future and like delaying gratification, if they were the ones earning all of the inflation, that is a better system.
True. I guess I got a bit of a math question. Sure does. I got a bit of a math question based on something Crispy said earlier. So theoretically, if 100% of all hex was staked, what would that do to the supply chart for T-shares look like? Would it just be a straight flat line, as in the T-share rate would not drop if it was 100% efficient?
Well, first, the T-share rate will never drop. It can only be flat or go up.
Sorry, right. T-share supply.
Oh, T-share supply. I think that, so that's a very theoretical type of thing, but let me show you what we do have on that while I answer that. So if we look at what we call max T-shares and what that could look like, the maximum number of T-shares that could be in existence kind of goes on a curve like this, again, because of estimates of how much hex would exist at a different time. And the maximum number of T-shares is defined as if on a particular day, all of the circulating hex was all accumulated and staked at one time in one Quattro Cinco. The maximum number of T-shares that could be created would be that plus the existing T-shares at that time. And so you can see that over time, hopefully everybody out in the audience can see it better.
And you've got two lines there. is one of those the OA? Like it includes the OA?
No, I have a separate chart. This does include the OA, and when we remove the OA, these numbers get cut in half. So if we look at the current date, right around here, where we are right now, the maximum number of T-shares that could be created on the Pulse chain is something around 55 million, right? So that's the most that could be created if somebody enacted that strategy, which they won't, right? It's theoretical. That's as many that could be in existence.
But and so that's about 2x the supply of Bitcoin right now. And we can see into the future that number will eventually get to 21 million and keep going down.
Correct. It'll just keep coming down. On this scale, it looks like it's flat, but it's really a downward trajectory. And then if we go to, if we exclude the OA, I love this one because it gets this conversation about excluding the OA. It's in half. I mean, the maximum number, I have P hex on the top here and then E hex at the bottom. So maximum number might be 9.32 million in the future, which has led me again, guys, I'm sorry, everything leads me to, I better stake my Quattrosenkos, right? So I got to the point where, because I believe in Hex and, I believe in the staking ladder approach. And so guys who are trading, I'm not saying you're wrong, do what you're going to do. But for me, if I'm doing Hex and I'm doing a staking ladder, I'm like, I'm not going to wait until 2039 to do a short stake. I'll just do a long stake now. Right. It's just in my head, I finally broke. And I was like, now I may be completely wrong. And if I am, you guys can tell me later. Right. But I think I'm right about it. And I think that I'm actually better off if I want stakes to come out every month than 2039, just making them now. So that I've kind of concluded that I've gone to the 2039 Quattrosenkos and soon to be 2040. And so when I look at this particular chart that I showed you here, and then I'll get to your actual question, which we didn't bother to answer yet.
Well, you kind of did. Just the maximum T-shirt chart is the answer to that question.
Well, it is, except that you asked what would happen, and so this is more of what would what could the maximum be created on any particular day. But let's say early on somebody actually did that, right? It actually happened. Well, the T-shirts would just start to trend down again, right? Why? Because you would have already created all that could be created at that point. And now if people are using the system, they're going to be ending stakes. And when they end the stake, those T-shirts go away. And so the only thing it could do is go down. And so you might see, a little choppiness here and there on particular days as it dropped down. But overall it would just be a downward trend.
Okay. I think if you can go back to the max T-share chart, not this one, but the other one, we have that much more dramatic shape. So it's a little easier to explain, I think. But based on what I'm seeing is if the proper assumption is that the total Hex supply itself is going to inflate at a rate of 3.69% every year, including the OA. So excluding the OA, which is 90% theoretically, that's about 36.9% every year. That is a linear growth curve. When it comes to the T-shares, what we're talking about measuring in a rate that constantly changes because the T-share rate changes on a daily basis. So when we compare the total supply of Hex and then we divide that supply by that rate, if we do that on a daily basis, and it's kind of calculus territory a little bit, but that's why we get the shape that we get here, which is that logarithmic curve pretty much, that downwards to the right. It looks like it might approach a limit, but in reality, it probably just goes infinitely towards zero as the true limit.
Yeah, over enough time. And in Hex, really the cycles are 15-year cycles, right? So we'll have many multiple cycles within, maybe it's 3 to 4 cycles within a 15-year period, but it's really cycling on 15 years. I would go back to your previous comment though, where you said that the growth is linear. It's not. I know
the inflation of supply.
Yeah, I know the 369 feels that way, but remember that the 369 inflation is based on ever minted Hex. It has to have been minted in order for that inflation to be applied. And so that means that all of this hex that's tied up in rewards hasn't been minted yet.
Okay.
And it's going to come out eventually, one way or another, whether it comes out through penalties or through an ended stake. And when it comes out, then that gets applied to it. So it's not quite linear. I don't know if you'd call it a hockey stick, but it's not linear for sure. I don't think you define it that way.
But it's less than the linear rate of 3.69 because of all the effects.
Well, the 369 is a constant, so under the definition, you multiply the constant for the day by the number of hex that's ever been minted, and so that's always the case, right? But what we've observed with and shout out to Ninad, one of our admins out in the hex chats, he had created a really good model that kind of shows what the realized inflation is of hex, and it's more like 1.5% overall on the system. That's the real, because what we're looking at is the change in circulating supply over a period of time, and then what is that percentage and annualizing it. And so on a monthly basis, it just chop around, but the average is around 1.5%. Now, usually what that does is that draws the ire of critics, right? Whenever we say that, and they come in like in droves, like, you guys are wrong. It's not like that. It's 10 times more. And so again, if you define it differently, they're right. And so what would be the difference? Well, when we talk about the system, it includes the OA, right? And when you talk about the people that are involved and you exclude the OA, then that picture of inflation changes, because who's getting the inflation? Stakers are getting the inflation. How much hex do they control? 10%, right? And so those numbers all change quite a bit. But you can still point to the fact that, and we do get that criticism, sometimes I do anyways, that it's misdirecting people. But I think, again, it's all in the definition of what you're doing, with it. But that's exactly, so it's kind of funny. I had somebody complaining about it, and I don't mean to make fun of them, but they were like, hey, this system's all wrong. It pays the stakers too much inflation. Wait a minute. That's what Hex was designed for.
Yeah.
It was designed for. It was to pay the stakers the inflation. And so you could argue whether it's healthy or not healthy, the amount is not healthy, whatever, but it's working as designed. Those people who are getting the returns now with the number of hex, they locked up for 5 years and they met their commitment. That's what they're getting. They're getting the payback for that. If you don't think they should have that much, go stake. You can take it away from them.
OA seems to be a bit of an enigma that can trip people up. I would attribute it more to something as an acceptable risk, or if you have what's more of akin to a leap of faith in actually believing that nothing's ever going to happen to the OA, that you can treat it as a constant, in which case you can make your own calculations around that existing. But when the critics of the hex system overall reference the risk that the OA possesses to the overall system, I can understand it, but at the same time, it's a risk calculation to be like, all right, what's the probability that the OA is ever going to move or in any way, shape, or form? If it's low enough for you to actually start building your own system or your own strategies off of, then I think that's where that's kind of the differentiation between the critics versus the people that accept that risk and try to build in the hex ecosystem.
I think there's an Easter egg there. Like, certainly the OA, if it was controlled by a person, that person probably had a good idea what people's perception would be, and that it would keep out, some bigger players who didn't want to take that perceived risk. But when we look at the future, the OA has all these tokens and they're not really doing anything. They're not moving. What would happen? And this is a contentious theory. I know some people don't agree with me, but what would happen if all of a sudden the OA burned all those tokens? They're gone. So the risk is gone. So the outside whales could come in. I think that could be a big boom on the ecosystem in a positive way.
It would be pretty interesting if the OA was to well, first off, let's level set. Hex cannot be burned in the normal fashion, like make it disappear burned. What it can be done, what can be done to it is it can be sent to a dead address, like the DEAD address or the 369 address, and make it inaccessible. That could happen. So what would it do? Yes, it would. It might. Some might interpret that as a benevolent signal, right? In that the hex was locked up and never could see the light of day again, and then they're free to do what they want in the system, and perhaps that could happen in the future. Don't know. I mean, it's in the cards in that if you were to come up with a number of different scenarios and assign a percentage that the possibility could happen, it could be in the list.
I think so. Think of another like beneficial possibility. Like, what if, for example, the OA account made like a hex stake in a HSI, like a Hedron HSI, for example, and then like made a 15-year 5555 hex stake, and then sent that to the dead address? What would happen then?
Yeah,
nobody can claim it. Nobody can emergency end stake it.
I don't think they would ever do that, because I think they would stay native centric. But yeah, that would. But what it would do is it would take rewards and yield away from everyone else and reduce the the amount of APY. But there are also some people who are pretty knowledgeable that have called for that. The idea of doing that now, and to a certain extent, the OA. So the OA could come back. By the way, guys, listen. Just because we haven't seen the OA do a lot doesn't mean they couldn't do something. They could. It's there. I think it's there for a couple different reasons. One is to maintain guardrails, but also to do something else that would affect the system in a positive light if it was needed to. But they could come back. But they effectively do have stakes that go out, and already they're participating in that way. But over time, those stakes die off, right? And what we've seen is that while the OA hasn't ended the stakes, when they get past their expiration date, other people come in and go count them and take them off the books. And so they just become, for the moment, they're just static piles of hex locked in stakes that haven't been removed, but no longer earn yield. And so in a way, they are disappearing, and the yield will go up even from that, or the rewards will go up even from that over time. Right, like there's stakes that are scheduled to come out this year, I think.
Okay. So the OA is making some stakes, but it's not staking the whole amount, obviously.
Well, they
not ending the stakes.
They did a ladder in the beginning, and that's it. They haven't touched it.
Okay. I see. So no recent stakes. It's all old action.
Yeah, old. Again, right? I mean, never say never. I certainly didn't. Maddie was smart enough to make calls about what the OA might do. I wasn't smart enough. I mean, I was actually surprised at Big Payday that go figure. Why would I be surprised? I don't know, but I was surprised that the OA staked on Big Payday. It threw me for a loop. I didn't know that was going to happen. A lot of people didn't anticipate that, but it did happen. But yeah, I think going all the way back to Zenith's comment and question and your follow up. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a barrier to entry, and it's not a bad thing that the OA exists for that reason. If you believe and trust in it, that it's doing things for the for the positive of the system, you're able to get past it. And if you're unable to take, to accept that based on your own experiences and thinking in life, then you don't participate. So it's kind of like a barrier to entry in that way.
Are barriers good though, or do we want just as many people as we can get? Right? Like, where's the benefit?
Both. You want both. You want the people who are willing to do it. I think Richard was the one that coined this term. Is either that generally only two types of people are really super interested in hex, and the rest of them are like, I don't know about this. It's either people that aren't smart enough to understand what the hell is going on and they just YOLO in, or people that are super brainiac. It's like a polarity.
It's the bell curve.
I've noticed that.
New whales. It's hex is an IQ test.
There you go.
I mean, when it comes to the adoption question and whether or not the OA actively encourages or discourages people, I think that's a question that kind of actually starts to point to something that we haven't really talked about tonight as part of the system, which is price appreciation in terms of some other currency that you wish to exchange it for, or just base USD if you want to just have a good measuring stick. That's where it comes to, which is that like the system itself is going to take care of itself when it comes to the idea of supply, T-share rate, and payout. And that is what works in and of itself. And there are ways to have strategies within that. But then there's that fourth factor, which is price appreciation, which is what we're measuring all of this against. So that's why I think that the OA scaring some people off is, from the price appreciation thing, it's probably not a good thing, because any barrier to entry is theoretically lost people getting into the system. Lost people getting into the system means that there's just less buy pressure in general. But at the same time, it also means that there's probably less people that are willing to make quick sales and kind of like jeet in and out, so to speak. So it could create a more stable price system as opposed to just exponential price growth.
Right.
Yeah, more true believers for sure versus
but it hasn't,
just traders.
Well, yeah, I'm with you. I'm sorry, I overtalked on you there.
All good.
Well, I was going to throw this to you. For staking, that is true. But apparently the Jeets don't mind speculating.
Jeets don't mind eating the diminishing T-share supply?
Yeah, because that's what they're doing. In fact, our Hex holders are all-time highs right now. People who are accumulating Hex in anticipation for trading. And so my viewpoint on this is not everybody's viewpoint, but and it's very controversial. We need, maybe it's not that controversial, but we need people of all types involved in crypto to be interested in Hex, including speculators and traders, and to give them fertile landscape to do their thing. They need high volatility. And oh, by the way, that high volatility gives me what I need, which is price appreciation over time. And what's happening while this is going on, and this is the part that not everybody sees and they don't want to really hear about, is that all this trading is, there's winners and losers, and a little part of that trading activity gets stored as value incrementally into Hex. Right. So the more of that goes on, the more valuable Hex becomes. And so we want that because we want there to be high volatility, which it kind of sucks, right? I don't like 99% down, right? But that kind of volatility is what gives somebody an opportunity to come in at the lows, buy, and sell at 5x, right? And that creates this continued volume and use of the system, totally outside of staking. I've theorized that it's possible that the Hex staking class could go silent and become like a hidden thing that nobody even cares about. The only people that care about it are the ones that are doing the staking and winning. As long as Hex can be traded and it's volatile, it'll just continue to have its price cycles. And now that we've seen Uber, I mean, come on, it's $20 million worth of liquidity. I mean, it's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, it's not the biggest pool, but there's $20 million worth of liquidity out there. As long as PulseChain exists, there's going to be liquidity. And so these cycles can continue. And so, yeah, I mean, we are seeing that people less interested in staking overall, maybe because they just don't know, or they're too short-sighted. I don't know. I try to educate as I go with it. But those who are staking, they are going to win, right? Because at least in this portion of the game of Hex, because they will have rewards coming out through their ladder for a very long time. And if Hex, and of course we're very, very early, 5 years into this, if Hex is going to continue to have higher lows on cycles, so okay, and the next low is 5 cents, maybe. I kind of guess it'll be a 5 or 6 cents during the next bear. That's what, 10, 12 times higher than it was at the last low, whatever the numbers might have been. And so that's wonderful for me. I have a staking ladder. I'm going to have Hex coming out. It'll just be worth more, and I'll have more rewards. But that may not, but that still may not sway somebody who wants to do the swapping and the trading, because I can tell you I've observed and seen and have participated and seen stuff where people, yeah, they truly do triple and quadruple their money sometimes on these trades, but sometimes they don't. You know,
most traders lose. That's a statistic for sure. It's not the big winners, except for the 1% that may or may not be telling the truth.
Yeah, there's that too.
Gamblers only talk about their wins, right? They don't talk about their losses. So I think
there you go.
Well, sometimes after they win, they talk about the losses. I go, well, I remember this time, but see how great it.
Right, yeah.
And I'm not digging on anybody. Listen, I know that this is what the game is. I mean, that's the game. But when I go play blackjack, I have kind of a reasonable chance I might come out with more than I left, but usually I don't. But roulette, forget about it. Roulette, forget about it. Even though I like to play the roulette, most of the time I just walk out broke, unless I just happen to be lucky, right? And
it's partly human nature. You probably keep rolling as long as you keep playing the game, eventually you'll lose, right? So I think that's what it comes down to with traders too. They have one win and then they're like, I'm going to do it again. And they keep trying until they have no money left. That's how gamblers work.
And I hope I'm being clear. Listen, I don't think the people who listen to this show are pretty much the gambler type. Maybe some of them are, but I'm not taking it away. I want them to continue to do whatever they want to do, because that is what transfers value. Until we get to a jump the shark moment, and I think Hex can become that jump the shark, meaning something changes so dramatically within crypto that there is this brand new use case that actually is being realized, right? Out in the real world, right? And now that's coming. I just don't know how it's going to actually happen yet. Maybe Hex will lead that. I don't know. But until then, it's a bunch of people trading back and forth trying to win. And not everybody's a winner. And one of the ways to kind of outpace that is, while the game's going on, you're holding the token. And if you get yield or rewards while you're holding the token, even better. And then as things match up, you can be smart about it, take profits at tops, restake, and live through the next cycle.
That's fair. To have a bit of honesty in here, though, I think the differentiation between investors and traders is honestly just the time scale. Because if you're an investor that never intends to sell, what you are effectively is just a collector. So it's different time scales. And I think that to give people the benefit of the doubt for the folks that do walk away from Hex, is that I think the reason that they do so is that they have found some sort of rationalization for a self-interest that believes there are more beneficial or more efficient activity outside of the ecosystem. And again, a lot of that is largely dependent on price action. Like you mentioned earlier, what is the next price floor? We just don't know, simply. We can speculate based on previous historical trends, but at the end of the day, we really don't have that crystal ball of the future. So I can understand why that's the rationalization about what it is. But for the people that are inside the system, like all of us are, I assume, is that we do have that baseline hypothesis that the overall chart for Hex is going to be some sort of up and to the right, whether it's super sharp or it's more flat or just somewhere in the middle. That is the determination that we have made, and the reason why we're here as opposed to somewhere else with our time, energy, and money.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I can support that statement. I agree with you that, even with my idea of staking, I'm not clean as the white driven snow either. Right. The idea is that
none of us
I'm somehow, yeah, my mustache gives it away. But this idea that, I'm going to sell eventually to take profit. Where did that come from? Somebody else stored value. Now, in the longer time frames, maybe that's exactly what this is all about. Is enough value get stored because we can create, and this is something RG3 goes after a lot, about the idea that the community that we're creating has value. All right, the value. I mean, I'm not putting it in his words, so I don't mean to put words in his mouth.
Lots of value.
But the community has value. The fact that we're here together has value. What you're able to extract from Hex is just a it's just a sideshow to the whole thing. It's what you're able to do. And if we were, and it's just like a lot of people talk about the price going down. If we all decided we weren't going to sell, the price is only going to go up, guys, right? I mean, that's the only way it can go if none of us sell.
True.
And so with a strong enough community going in a direction, obviously we know that there's going to be somebody who's going to sell, right? But that's what would happen with X if we all decided not to sell. It's one of the tongue-in-cheek things that Richard had said. It was so funny when it was happening. People were like bitching, how come the price didn't double again in the last 20 days? Well, stop selling, right? If you want the price to go up, don't sell. But in reality is we have many players, many different types of people involved, and of course some are going to sell. And so it's an overtime type of thing.
I'm loving this episode. I'm thinking this is one of my favorite episodes that we've done in recent memory. I'm also being told that I'm gonna miss the entire event that I'm supposed to go to, and so I would love if you guys want to keep it going. That'd be cool. If you want to wind it down, that's cool too. I do want to just point out. I want to make a couple announcements real quick, and then you guys can decide what you want to do. Shout out to Gerardo for creating a new website that was launched today called PulseChain.community. And this is a website that he was actually in the chat earlier, and might be able to come on the show next week or sometime. I guess he's still cooking right now. God bless him, right? Because this is an awesome website. It shows 125 plus apps. It shows 178 plus creators, and he's already updated this since earlier today. It's got a link to everybody's Twitter and YouTube, and so this is an incredible asset. And then I also want to shout out to GoPulseChain.com, which is also another community hub resource that was launched by Liquid Loans. They've been very supportive of the channel and the entire ecosystem. And so there's multiple examples here of how people are creating things just because they love the community and they love the types of cryptos that we love. So fantastic. Shout out to everybody creating that good kind of stuff. I have sold in between 150 and 200 of the Solid Us key.com coins that are first edition and are the easiest way to onboard to PulseChain, and come with an instruction booklet that I wrote that tell you all about how to onboard to PulseChain, whether you're new or even if you're an expert. It's a cool collectible. And so right now, since I'm at this conference, I won't be able to ship them until the beginning of next week, but people can keep ordering. There's a link in the description below for solidusKey.com, and that'll bring you to this site that'll show you all the details. And they're like $25 each, free shipping in the US. If you're international, add $30 for shipping, and order more than one. If you order 6, you get a free Ethereum coin along with it. And so yeah, really good stuff there. And I also want to shout out Crypto 7. Took money out of his own pocket and was promoting Hex and PulseChain to Ivan on Tech, and gave like several $100s in super chats. And then also Silver the Antidote did something where he's pledged thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to selflessly promote a Hex. And so when the title for this stream was like the Hex and PulseChain community and like highlighting that, it's the examples are bountiful. So a shout out to everybody for that.
Do you want me to switch over to my other account, Maddie? Because
that'd be great. Yeah, and we'll make sure that you're in control, because there was one time I didn't have anybody to end the stream and it didn't end.
Oops.
But Zenith, I also wanted to compliment you on your appearance the other day on, I think it was Corey Geary's Friday Hangout. And
thank you.
Because you spoke really well about the court case and you gave a little bit of like your background as somebody who's like familiar with legal jargon, so to speak. And that was really cool to see you come across so well spoken and informative for people who all really want to know what's going on, and they want commentary, even if it's not a sure thing of this different kind of stuff. So that was really cool, and you've done a great job on the show. And Fast Abdul and ChrispyMan are like just really amazing people who get on here and help us do the show for all the whales and all the way down to shrimp that are watching every week. So thank you guys for that.
I'm here for the tech
and the bribes.
The bribe tech specifically, yes.
Very cool.
Thanks, Maddie.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Yeah, and I'll probably be listening in while I'm in transit to this event. But I hear there's lots of good people that on board. They already know about Ethereum. Right. This is an Ethereum conference, and we want to get them into Hex and PulseChain. So,
the event is an Ethereum conference.
Yes, permissionless 3. All right. Thanks, guys. Peace.
Thanks, Maddie.
Thanks, Maddie.
Bye, Maddie. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you next week at I just end like, Maddie. So what do you guys want to talk about?
I wanted to talk about tokenized hex products. There's a new one coming out. So kind of like, a cross between Icosa and Maximus DAO. It's called Actuator. Yeah. And I haven't done a full deep dive yet. Their white paper is like heavy stuff. But it's the concept is that it's kind of almost like an ETF where you have a one-to-one representation of a hex stake, not even a hex stake, a tokenized hex stake, right? So you have very direct control of it, but it's another way to tokenize a hex stake. Where the stake actually exists. You have staked it for 3,000 days, 8,000 days, and so on and so forth. They have various different options. I imagine there's probably a 5/5/5/5 option, and you end up still being potentially liquid, but you're rewarded if you follow through. And I think that's a big part of what they're building to the protocol is it rewards the people who follow through with the initial promise, which is, maybe a little more direct than what we see with Maximus DAO and their pooled staking format. So I think it's something to watch. I'm not saying everybody run out and get into it, but certainly it's an interesting idea, and the fellows who are working on it are pretty sharp. So I'm going to learn more, but it makes me happy to see that there's additional things that are happening to basically encourage people to stake Hex or to have protocols that stake Hex as part of their function. And I think there's a future in that where, like you said, we're seeing a change in the Hex staking behavior. But I think this could be a change for the better to have more protocols that enforce long-term hex staking by the nature of what they do.
Yeah, 100%. So we can talk about this just a few more minutes too. Sure. But what we are saying to everybody is we are not advocating. Maddie's not advocating.
Not at all.
Until more research is done, but I am intrigued by it. I like the idea that things are being built on Hex, and I like there's Hex 1 protocols out there. That's a newer one that's coming. We have this protocol Actuator. I'm sure there's other ones that on the tip of my tongue that I can't remember. What's interesting about Actuator, particularly for those folks who picked up HSIs, it is an opportunity to borrow against the HSIs in a fashion that's different than the Hedron borrowing. So it could be a much greater value, which could be important for folks who might have done that play.
Yeah. I think it's the more the merrier. But yeah, this is a very different formula from what we saw with the Hedron HSIs, which are kind of an NFT that has like a yield component attached to it. But it's it's going to be an interesting thing to see how these things can tie together.
Well, I'm pretty sure with
them.
I'm pretty sure with Actuator you can actually borrow against your HSIs, because it's the way they make their stakes, their tokenized stakes, is by utilizing the Hedron ecosystem. So when you go through their front end to make a stake, you're actually making an HSI stake. If I'm not mistaken.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
If I'm not mistaken, if somebody knows, put it in there. I don't want to give out bad information, but
so
I thought
I can get a Hedron against it as well.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe that. Well, any hex stake, the way that had been written, you would have been able to pull your Hedron anyways.
Right. Interesting. But yeah, definitely a deeper dive on this one for sure, because it's heavy stuff. But I think the concept of having more tokens that represent hex stakes, and of course, I'm interested in the liquidity farming aspect of it. I'll be knocking on the door of those guys to figure out how we can pair hex against hex in more ways to make low and permanent loss yield farms that pay lots on a protocol we know and love. But I think there's definitely something here that's going to apply to maybe it's going to apply to a wider audience when they see they can participate without and potentially stay liquid. It just depends there's always a trade-off though, right? And I think one of the trade-offs is if you're liquid, then you're not protected from yourself in the same way as if you were just staked in a regular hex stake that's not an HSI, that you can't turn into ICOSA, that just forces you to wait or take a very large penalty, so you're just not going to. So that is, the emotional and trade-off of having to think about it, and the actual trade-off of having the decision in your hands, and maybe you'll make a mistake, is still on the table. But personally, I like to have the options. I like thinking about stuff.
Yeah.
The hex stake instance is something I've been very fascinated with ever since I really had a chance to hang out with Crypto Kool-Aid, because he's a very big proponent of the whole Hedron ICOSA ecosystem, and that when it's functioning properly and there's enough liquidity in it, it's a machine that circulates itself very well and offers unique abilities to like either borrow against hex or use the auction system to get rewards for it, or just mint some base ICOSA Hedron as a result and being rewarded for being a hex staker.
For sure.
I'll fully admit the first time I saw it, I didn't understand what it was, and I was still pretty new to hex, and I thought it was a vampire attack trying to like leech value out of hex. And boy, was I wrong. But the HSI system, I think, is something I personally think is an interesting idea and would love to see more ideas built on. Like, it's a crazy idea. I would love to have more GameFi projects on PulseChain, and I've dabbled with a very, very little bit of like game building and coding on my side of the house, and I know that's quite difficult. So I always applaud and tip the hat to the people that do it well. But even something kind of like silly and stupid, like maybe you have like a monthly like rock paper scissors tournament that's like online, and then whoever wins, your reward is that you get just like a Quattro Cinco HSI as part of it, and then other fees get burned and whatever, and NFTs get thrown around as rewards for like, hey, here's your first place trophy, and here's the HSI that goes with it. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Anybody could do that now. Like, those things are there. If you wanted to make a game where hex was the reward, that's totally doable.
It just, I wonder if one of the ways that we can add value to hex itself is by incorporating it into more projects like I'm alluding to here. Granted, at the end of the day, I think people might just be more interested in the monetary value of whatever it is, whether it's hex or something else. But if you put it in a certain denomination, it's similar to the idea that if we force the world to trade for oil in US dollars are going to benefit as a result. So if we make fun games that pay out hex is going to benefit as a result.
Right. Yeah, I think those will all be pretty cool ideas to see them come to fruition. There's also some projects that have already been created that are pretty beneficial. So I'll take a moment just to plug the Comm project, because that's a big one. You've heard of the Comm before, Zenith?
Communis?
Yeah, Communis. Yep.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've looked a little into it, and I plan on minting some of it here soon, but I don't know a ton outside of just like the basics.
Let me try my maybe 30 seconds. I never talk that little, but I'll try my 30 second pitch. Communis is rewarded exclusively to native stakers of hex. Longer pays better because it's tied, and bigger pays better because it's tied to T-shares. And its aim is to actually be an automated marketing of hex. And you say, well, how can that be? Well, if you classify yourself as either, hey, you're a new client of Hex, right? Somebody who's coming in, or you are someone who's looking to market Hex, and you have those two classifications. When Comm is awarded to people, it's an airdrop like thing. It's not an airdrop, you got to go claim it, but it acts as an instant rebate, right? So it has a value, right? Just like anything else. If you said, hey, I'm going to give you X because you hold Y, it has a value. And so it acts as an instant rebate. And so from a marketing perspective, if you go to somebody who's new and you're like, hey, we really think, Quattro Cincos could be something you should consider. They go, well, I don't want to put that much value out there. But then you say to them, well, no, if you put the value out there, you're going to get 10% back, 15% back as an instant rebate. So you get the opportunity to put it out there. And you get 15%, 10%, whatever the current rate is. And that's defined.
If that went up. What if it was 50%, right? Like
or,
how many people would,
or 100%, right?
Oh, well, man, I'd be on it.
So I've seen people realize 15 or 20% on it, right? So from hey, I'm a prospective new person that we want to convert, that can be a great thing. If you are someone who cares about Hex, and like big players in Hex should be thinking about this, you would buy Comm, right? So if you've ever, and the reason you would buy Comm is because that represents value you're putting on the market, in order to entice someone who's new to stake. You're basically putting value into a token, increasing the price, giving them a stronger rebate rate, and therefore they would stay.
They're more likely to do it, yeah.
And so
Comm has their farm on 2 fucks.
Yeah,
that's another way you can
I've seen that. There's more than one farm, right? But not all. I guess not all of them are 2 fucks. But here's the thing about this. So a lot of people get like, I don't know about this. Well, you have to think of it this way. If you're one of the people who's willing to put $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 into a race car advertising, or some big banner somewhere or something else, you use dollars to create marketing. All right. So looking at Comm, you can apply that concept and say, hey, I'm going to buy Comm in order to increase the price and therefore entice more people to participate in Hex, because the only way you can get Comm is by staking Hex. It's the only way you can get it. And so
it has to be a native state, so you can't liquidate it.
I mean, you can't liquidate it. Well, you could merge the end stake it, but you won't get your Comm either for that.
Terrible plan. Okay.
Yeah. So
when do you get the Comm? Get it up front? You get it right away?
It's a 2-part thing. You get an upfront start bonus, and you can also get an end bonus if it's upstart from Comm's got its whole thing, about it's really there to entice a staking ladder and keeping your staking ladder up. So for 180-day stake, you can get a start bonus. For anything 365 days or longer, you get a upfront, what we call start bonus. And at the end of the stake, you'll get a end bonus, of which you can then turn around and stake to earn additional APY on that Comm. But it's very difficult. It's a hard concept that we're continuing to work on to explain to people, that it really is that. I mean, if I go, and part of it is like this. You guys have been in business before, so you know this, I'm pretty sure. You know how when you do marketing dollars and you have a marketing budget, okay? And usually somebody who's in charge, like, so what am I getting for my money? And everybody who's doing marketing is like, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, right? Because what happens is it doesn't matter what kind of marketing it is. It's very hard to tie marketing budget to actual results. And this is why there's people that are professionals in this and actually do this, right, for a living, because they're trying to tie it. So it's kind of like that with the Hex Comm system as well, because there's a lot of stakers out there. The population's huge in terms of people. I mean, maybe 100,000 wallets, maybe it's 50,000 people. But it's pretty huge. So it's hard to tie that these people did anything specific because the Comm price went up. But that's the concept. If I go put $10,000 into Comm, increase the price, I still have the tokens, the Comm tokens, right? That money has not been spent on conversion yet. It's spent when somebody claims their Comm and swaps it out. And so that's another thing that's been out there that we've been talking about for quite a while.
But if you claim your farm and put Comm and put it in a yield farm, then you're increasing liquidity for everybody else, and you're not selling your tokens.
Yeah, and you're supporting the that coupon rate. I'm gonna leave you guys for just a moment to talk between yourselves. I'll be back.
Oh,
we'll be here.
When you get back, I do have a question for you on the Communist stuff, though.
Oh, well, go ahead before I leave, so we can close that off, and then you guys can talk about the two P-Hucks, and or maybe some other things. Right?
Do that. So I like these kind of systems. It's also partly why I like Hedron Icosa. The question that I always try to ask people, especially whenever I get pitched stuff like this, which is that you can mint tokens based off of stake of something else, is that I try to relate all of my crypto investment and like trying to understanding like how the flow of money and value works, akin to like thermodynamics, which is that energy can never be created or destroyed, and it can only change form. And a lot of times there's entropy involved, so you're never even going to break even. And that's in the form of like gas fees, losses, permanent loss, whatever you want to say. So when it comes to stuff like Communist, the thing that I want to ask people is like, I understand that I have put economic energy into my Hex stake. So if I want to, I can make this thing. We can make the thing real easy. But then where does the value in the thing come from? As in like the liquidity, the market cap, whatever it is that there's only so much value that is in it and that is able to be theoretically extracted out of it. Like if someone sold all of it that they ever had, like how much money could you get out of it? So the question for me with Communist stuff is that I understand that it's a way to incentivize people to stake longer, but it might be a negative EV play almost if you think about it, because I care about the Hex stake the most. That's the thing that I care about the most. If I have something else that's trying to incentivize either myself or other people to stake Hex, that does theoretically drive people to add economic energy to the Hex side of the equation. But then on the Communist side of the equation, what is my incentive to add money in here that is more advantageous than me just taking that same amount of economic energy and just making another Hex stake?
Because you're using it to market to other people. That's really the crux of it, right? Because I see your point exactly. If you're arguing about that, you're not making an argument per se, but I mean, you're like, why would I do that? And it took me a long time to understand this.
It's just asking the question: are you creating nothing out of nothing, or are you creating something out of an existing system?
You can look at it. You can look at it as you gifting value to new Hex stakers in order to entice them to stake. Okay,
fair enough.
I mean, that's what it really boils down to. Now, in the middle of all that, right? Because if Communists had no liquidity and you were the first guy that came in and gave it liquidity, you're basically putting up value that you're not going to get back potentially, purely so that Fast Abdul will stick, because he now sees that he can get them. And that's what broke my brain with it too, because like this crypto, right? I want to have value of what it was going to do. And this is something that Johnny tried to explain, Johnny Sachs, about this, and we all lost it. We all couldn't figure it out. It was way too hard for us to understand what he was saying. At the end of the day, if you care enough about Hex and you want the price to go up, and it's not for everybody, right? Maybe it's not for people with really small bags. You can entice people to stake for more and longer by giving them value back. You have a decentralized marketing mechanism here to do that.
Bribes. Bribes are the mechanism.
Yeah. But in the middle of all that, you also have market dynamics where something that's very illiquid could go to a very high price. Right. And you also have the long-term effect of growing liquidity pools, which would stabilize potentially that price. And so perhaps it's not always about just Communists being just you put value in and you lose it, right? I mean, I still have my tokens. I accumulated a quad because I want to support what's happening with it, and the quad being a quadrillion of those, right? 1,000 trillion. And but the idea behind it is to support that Hex price and the idea of that, because I find it pretty cool. And in the meantime, I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of funny this way. I like being able to build my staking ladder, so it's rewarding me for that. So I keep stacking my Comm and putting it into my Comm stake, and it pays me 5%. And perhaps someday that'll be worthwhile enough for me to live off of that. I don't know.
I like it. I just always ask the questions to make sure that the people explaining things
No,
to me
that's
are
good.
making genuine arguments. But at the end of the day, I also have already swallowed the black pill that is everything is a Ponzi scheme and that everything is a bubble technically.
the black pill.
Well, yeah. It's the truth, which is that like even in the S&P 500 market, like it only works because people have constant buy pressure to the point that it actually outperforms the P to E ratios or any sort of dividends that can be acquired by holding any of those actual stocks. Mm-hmm. So at a certain point, theoretically, when all the baby boomers start retiring and everyone starts drawing on it, we might have a net buy system to a net sell system. And instead of just getting that forever up into the right effect, we might actually start to see maybe like a decade or two where we have constant sell pressure that either holds it flat or maybe pushes it down into the right a little bit. It's the same idea, which is that there's only there's a finite amount of money or economic energy that can be put into each of the systems. And the reason to put it into the systems as an investment for the future is to believe that the system is going to perpetuate itself and it will be backfilled at some point. So theoretically, with stuff like with either Hex or even Communists in this case, the idea is that as long as it keeps getting backfilled, the economic energy is going to continue to keep getting recycled and push it forward into the future. So,
yeah. Well, we talked about Communists just a moment ago. We took the approach of somebody putting value in, and that's what drives it. But you also have the other effect is that of course it is going to be successful, but as it's successful and more people stake Hex, Communists by its nature becomes more valuable because it can only be created through that Hex staking, and the liquidity pairing draws it up as well. So there's a lot of dynamics to it. But yeah, I think it's a pretty cool subject myself, and I like anything that's going to help increase the value of Hex because just the fact that it's there could draw much more value in.
Oh yeah, the existence is a bit of functionality on its own. It is an extra thing that did not previously exist. Therefore, it is technically an addition. Like it.
That's how it goes. Yeah. All right, I'm going to leave you guys just for a few minutes. I'll be right back.
Fast Abdul's back. He did the classic costume change, but now he's a little warmer, right?
Yeah, I'm actually. It's not a costume change. I'm cold. It's like 12 degrees Celsius or something right now.
The old Celsius, the Queen's measurements, right?
It's more the science measurement, but I think the Queen likes it too, or she did.
That's true. So how many more weeks until bribing is alive?
Well, we're probably about 4 weeks out from there being bribes. So if people will be able to bribe others to participate by upping the yield on the pools on two fucks that they like. So for example, if you're into the communist pool, or how do you say it again?
Communist?
Yeah, there we go. If you were in that pool.
Sounds like the other one.
It does. If you were in there and you wanted people to increase the yield so that more people would want to participate by creating longer Hex stakes, you could bribe people who had votes on two fucks to vote for that pool. So it's a very direct equation, and it's actually a math problem. So we'll see which pools get the most votes, but it could certainly affect the pools that have Hex in them, like the Maximus DAO pools. Like somebody could bribe the community to vote for those pools and make them pay 80% yield on Maximus DAO tokens. Like, what would that do? Would that be a good thing? I think people could definitely use it for that, or we'll see who actually decides to pay the bribes. But I think it does fit very closely into the concept that we're talking about is, you're paying people to do an action that, it benefits the community. So it's much like communists or like Tetra, etc. Sorry, not Tetra, ICOSA. It's an incentive to get people to do the action online on chain that you want them to do. So and people respond to that. And certainly bribes are fun to talk about. So I do like that.
It's a very interesting and I think amusing gamification of a concept that's just kind of existed in the space, which is that theoretically, if you are in these staking pools for, I think, what is it? Prime 2 fucks is the token that gives you the ability to vote on stuff.
It's that 2 fucks token itself. Yeah. Controls 76% of the votes on the Fux exchange. So if you lock your 2 fucks tokens, which is a 16-week commitment, then during those 16 weeks, you can vote for which pool gets the most yield, right? So Correct. For founders or whales in things like those Maximus DAO pools that are paired with Hex, like, you could lock your 2 fucks tokens and then vote for those pools, and those pools will get more yield because of your votes. That's just how it works.
Exactly. And the whole bribing function is, if you don't care about your vote, why not sell it, right?
You could sell it, yeah. But if you do care about votes in general, you could put up the bribe, which is the other side of the equation, right? So you're going to have two parties involved. There has to be the briber and the bribee. So, and the briber is the one who's, they're swinging the big hammer and deciding where the yield goes, which is, could make ripples in the ecosystem. I think we'll see in the early days before whales and founders have picked up on what's going on, we'll see some sudden shifts in which pools pay the most yield, because people will certainly want to take the bribes. And if only 1 or 2 participants are putting up bribes, they'll probably get a lot of votes. So I'm curious to see how that goes. And I'm hoping some of the pools that I like get some bribes. Could be a thing.
I like it.
Yeah, why not?
I'm very excited for it. Should be a good time.
But it's just, it's something else on chain that's brought over from Ethereum. That concept's been around for a long time. And, the more that happens on chain, the better it is. The more that passes through PulseX, the more PulseX gets burned. It's all just part of the ecosystem. But we're definitely heavy on the DeFi part of the ecosystem, less on the meme coins, though they have a place too. Like meme coins are in yield pools. You could bribe someone to vote for your pool that had meme coins in it so that it paid better yield. But I'm hoping that, we get more bribes for some of these utility pools that have things that build in the ecosystem. I'd love to see those Maximus DAO pools paying out serious dough, or the communist pool. That'd be another great one that would actually result in more hex staking because of what happened. Oh, Crispy's back. Stop talking about bribes.
Bribe. I like bribes. Go.
Yeah, me too.
I was going to ask you a question though, because you were talking about the P hooks, the 2P hooks, and everything that's going on there. It occurred to me I was going to say something silly to you, but I want you to answer the question. With the whole 2fuck system, how do I accomplish V3 like LP? And I think there's an answer to this.
There's so on the P hooks exchange, it's a fork of Balancer V2. Okay, so it's not it doesn't have an exact V3 option, but you do have an option where you can have weighted pools, meaning and up to 8 tokens. So you could have 10% one token and 90% another token in the pool, which is similar to V3 in that way. And you can also change the fees to be basically whatever you want. So you could have a pool that, I think it's maximum 10% fee you could have in the pool. So you could have a pool that was 90% Hex, 10% Pulse with a 10% fee on it if you wanted that. I'm not quite sure why you do exactly that, but it's very much like V3 in that you can shift the amount of each token that's in there from 50-50 to whatever ratio you want. However, it readjusts to that ratio. Whoa. Sorry, it's okay. I was was
that a bear?
Bear's coming.
I thought it was a bear, but it was my father-in-law. So all is well.
Oh, okay. It might be a beard, not a bear.
I was going for my hatchet, but we'll let it pass this time.
It works.
But yeah, what were we talking about before I did that?
We were talking about the positives behind using P hooks for V3 like liquidity.
Yeah. So I think the concept is the same, except for you'll never go out of range, right? So you could set a 10% one token, 90% another token pool, and it will always balancer to being 10% and 90%.
Yeah, so you can actually have something that you can actually protect something, one of the assets or multiple assets, by keeping the effect on them very low, while the other asset vacillates and has high volatility. Right, that would be a way to look at that.
Yep, and it definitely contributes to the overall liquidity in a very stable way too, because if you think of creating something that's, let's say you create something that was 80% hex and 20% pulse, that supports the buying of hex 4 times more than it supports the selling of hex, right? Because of the ratio. So if you're looking to incentivize a certain behavior like buying hex, that's how you would do it. You'd make more hex there and less pulse, like an 80-20 with 80% on the hex side. If you're looking to do the opposite, you'd have the opposite in the pool. If you want to balance, if you want a 50-50, just like a V2 Uniswap pool, you can just put 50-50. So all the options are there. It just gives you more options, as well as you can add up to 8 tokens. So you could pair Hex, Communist, Maximus DAO, like whatever you want. And you can have these things that were moved together, so you have very little impermanent loss. So especially with the Maximus DAO tokens, that's my favorite example, just because you have like 6 versions of Hex that you can pair with Hex, and then it all moves up and down very closely. So it's kind of like an automatic arbitrage where you're collecting the fees on something, and the yield in the case of things that are incentivized with yield farms, without suffering the impermanent loss you would if it was just a V2 position with 2 things that were not correlated.
Very good.
Do you guys think there's anything else from other blockchains that PulseChain just doesn't have quite yet? I know you mentioned meme coins there a bit, but like we do have meme coins. I just don't think there's much people dedicated to getting that snowball going, so to speak. But any other projects you think that we're missing to round out our ecosystem?
There's definitely some things that could be brought over. I think we could use more native stablecoin projects. Like we have several right now that are based on liquidity forks, which is great because that's like a solid thing, and they're working like they should, in my opinion. We have Coast, but that's a different thing. That's more of an on and off ramp based stablecoin. But there could be other stablecoins that are that work different ways, like DAI type formats, etc. That would be great. What I'd really like to see is to have native copies of those tokens on our chain, like to have USDC native on PulseChain, right? Whereas there's USDC on Ethereum that's bridged to PulseChain. There's DAI on Ethereum that's bridged to PulseChain, right? Not the copies, the bridge part. But there could, in theory, be those things native on PulseChain, which I think would pull in whales because it takes out the bridge risk, which is one of the, which is relatively low, but there's still a perception there. And especially when people are moving millions of dollars, if you could have a native stablecoin like USDC or like DAI or USDT that actually lived on the PulseChain, I think that would be something real that would make a difference.
I agree with you. Only downside to trying to get USDC is they're going to extort you for $20 million for the privilege of having it on your chain. So
that's a different problem.
Yeah. What about you, Crispy? What do you think? We miss anything?
Well, I don't know that we're actually missing anything because there's so much that's been brought over. I'm sure there are some variations of some of the sites and whatnot that haven't been there yet. There are things coming to the blockchain, like I don't know, like the SolidX game that's being released. There's the PulsePot guys doing their work, waiting for. I guess they're still trying to get. That's an online casino style thing, where they're waiting to get their oracles set up. I think those types of things. I think I'm not so much stuck on everything needs to be replicated, but I'd like to see some jump the shark stuff, right? And I can't use that term. You ever hear that term before, jump the shark?
It was from the show with the Fonz, right?
It's a term that's applied to typically television shows, usually, right?
Where something a little too wacky.
Yeah, something was doing great, and then all of a sudden the writers really became so full of themselves. They write something and it's like boom, over the top, it's done, right? And but it could also be looked at as a changing things, changing reality in a way. So I'd like to really see something designed. I don't know what it is, that will cross out, cross over to real life. That's what I'd like to see, in a more substantial manner than we've seen already.
There could be some AI stuff for sure, where you have access to an AI or an AI driven protocol. And then of course there's the real world assets, which I think would be gangbusters on PulseChain. The community that you'd be advertising to if you brought over tokenized gold, tokenized property, tokenized, taxi rides, whatever, is, a pretty good community to advertise those products to. So I think if somebody can pull that off, that would be a win.
I think there's a good deal of marketing that's got to go into it as the salesmanship to get the people to build with, because you don't have to sell the Poleskins because we're already in it. It's to sell to the other people to get them to tie everything else to the chain itself. Yeah,
we're already here. Be able to bring that in. Oh, this is a good concept. This reverse concept. We do have a DEX. Well, at least somebody's created a DEX on called 9inch, right? That operates also on Ethereum. I don't know that it allows you to do any type of cross-chain swapping without bridging, but that's been a big question. What was that?
Cross-chain swaps could be a thing. We do have what's it called again? The Power City one. Portal X is run by Power City, and it allows for cross-chain swaps. So you can swap between the PulseChain and Ethereum potentially. It doesn't work with every pair you could possibly think of, but it does work like a swap. So that is an interesting add-on. But there could be forks of things like, I want to say 1inch has cross-chain swaps options, and I've heard of some founders that are working on things like that. Sure. So I think that would be cool, because think of the arbitrage you could do, especially with the bridged assets, like swapping like Hex from Ethereum bridge to PulseChain versus Hex on Ethereum, and so on and so forth. If you could do that quickly in a direct manner, that would be very interesting. Obviously, that's a little more complicated than bridging and then doing a second transaction. But I think there's definitely money to be made there if somebody can bite that off. Though I think it's a big thing to chew.
Yeah, it's a big thing. There's probably some regulations involved, maybe, with that. Certainly, anything that goes cross-chain or off-chain starts looking more like not DeFi, right? More like centralized CeFi. And I think that's part of the dilemma there. If you're trying to stay immutable and do that, it could be very difficult, almost impossible to do that without some sort of centralized server. And of course, then it's going to be end up on Azure or over on AWS. And how centralized is that?
Yeah, there you go.
When you end up having those types of things. But I guess I don't. You know what I'd like to do if I could just create my own project, I would create, the pizza giveaway project where I could send value on PulseChain to some address, and it sends the chosen person, like Zenith, is a free coupon for pizza. I get free pizza. There's like a whole thing of like I forget. I don't know if it wasn't called Donated Pizza, but Reddit had one of these for a long time. You go up there and say, "Hey, listen, I've had a bad day, bad week. I'd really like a pizza." And somebody would say, "Well, what happened?" And then they say, "Well, this, and this." And they say, "Well, here you go." And they send you the code, and boom, you got your Domino's pizza code. Not maybe the best pizza, but I live on the East Coast, so Domino's isn't, it's here, but I mean, it's not the number one. But anyways, that would be an example Maybe only for pizza lovers, but it's an example of something that might actually be doable, right? Because even if it is centralized, you're sending value out in order to something, print somebody a gift certificate, or
it could be like in the payment department. It could be like a payment protocol that allows you to pay for things with PulseChain. Could solve all those problems, right? So you'd want a very direct connection, but maybe that's something that needs to be centralized if it's to have the speed and adoption we need. But if it could not be centralized and you could, in a decentralized fashion, tap your phone, at a debit machine to pay for something, that would be pretty cool. And actually have it come off of the PulseChain somehow in an immediate way.
That's right. Everybody stop the presses. We need a pizza app right now.
Do it.
Nothing. Stop all your other work.
I think this is going to be one of those stories where, I paid 17 Bitcoin for a pizza in 2011. So,
well, I think Maddie did.
Let's not be that guy.
Yeah, Maddie already bought the Pulse pizza.
Did he buy a Pulse pizza? I think he did a Hex pizza. Somebody did, or maybe it was somebody post up and tell me who did it. I think Hexologist maybe did it. I don't know. A couple of us probably have done it.
See that.
So how are things been going around the DGen roundtable there, Zenith?
Oh, things have been going very well. I mean, put out our Q4 thesis show that you were very fond of because we had a very interesting shout out to you. But other than that, we're just keeping on with everything we're doing, trying to stay up to date with everything. I know Nate loves to give me flack because I'm more of the person that presses on the macroeconomic stuff, and he wants more of the DGen crypto stuff. So we strike the balance where we can. But I was crunching the numbers, trying to figure out if elections actually matter for markets. And spoiler, no, not really. So don't stress about that too much. Yeah, the bottom line of it was that anytime that the elections happen, the month of November didn't really do anything outside of the general macroeconomics trends. So last one was obviously Biden, Trump back in November of 2020. We were still on a bit of an upswing after the COVID recovery stuff. So didn't change anything there. The Clinton-Trump one in 2016, again, it was an uptrend as well. So didn't change anything there. 2012 was Obama and Romney. Again, uptrend as a recovery off of the 2009 lows. And then the only outlier here was the Obama-McCain election back in 2008, when we were just in probably the first third, maybe that transition point between there, like 33% way through the 2008-2009 crush. And it continued that trend, didn't really have any effect. And that was generalized markets, but gold didn't really react too much. Gold looked like it was more a reaction to inflation rates, and then crypto as well. Further back you go, it just didn't exist. But even then, it looks like it was just experiencing its own 4-year cycle from Bitcoin halving and all the effects of Hart's Law going on with that liquidity bonding. So if you're worried, it's not going to change the market. It is going to change conditions surrounding the market for regulations and who's building what where. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the Trump administration is a lot more pro-crypto as opposed to the Harris administration, which has largely been very anti-crypto with Operation Choke Point, all the stuff going on with the SEC, the appointment of Gary Gensler, and just the way that they've been handling themselves there. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for all that. There's a lot to unpack with it. I'm glad you put all that together, all the macro, and you're thinking about it. I have been watching you guys on a regular basis and hearing you talk. I've been really impressed with the book club, and that's actually paid pretty good dividends for you guys to get that out to people. And so I would encourage people who want to enlighten themselves a little bit and participate. Go follow Zenith and these guys on the DGen Roundtable. And you're doing that every Friday night, right? Is it Friday night?
Yes, book clubs are on Friday. So this last Friday, we covered the Millionaire Fastlane. This was a pretty good one. And there was actually an interesting point in here about compounding interest that I was reminded of when we started the stream tonight talking about it, which is that compounding interest is a very cool tool if you can get to the upper end of it as opposed to starting at the bottom. Because compounding $1 into $1.07 over the course of 3 years is not as cool as compounding $1 million into an extra $70K.
Yeah. I've been doing a lot of work and research with LP. That's why I'm asking fast these types of questions. So, with a big focus on stables and stable LP, in preparation for the end of this cycle and beyond, right? Because we often talk about all this stuff, but it relates to what you're saying is, quite often I'll find a position. I think other people probably run into similar types of issues. I'll find a position and I'll put it up and do a test spot, and it's like half a penny, 3 pennies. And it's like this thing's not moving. But if you actually do the calculation, it's like a 60% APY or even a 75% APY. So if you're able to scale something out, it makes all the difference. It's the same thing with the compound interest, right? But with compound interest, you really need not only over time to continue to add, but you just need to give it the time, because it really will happen over time. If it's truly compounding, you'll get that. Pretty cool that way.
Yeah. As far as the other book club stuff going, Will's actually doing the one this next week. He's doing The Value of Others. I haven't read it yet, so I can't give my opinion on it just yet, but we will be injecting that into my ear holes at 2.5 times speed on Thursday and Friday.
Yeah, you guys are fairly wholesome, I think. My opinion, right? It's just like a judgment, right? Like fairly wholesome. I mean, you got all the rough edges everybody else has, but you guys came originally out of some of the DCC stuff with Charlie and those guys, and so I know you'd gotten that kind of input. I've always observed that, this is just my feeling, is you guys maintain a pretty strong abundance mentality, open mindset, long term over short term. So all those fit pretty closely in my mind with my beliefs, right? And what I'm thinking about Hex and how Hex runs. So.
Yeah, much appreciated. I mean, it's one of the benefits of having the giant stable of contributors that we have, because there's 9 of us over there. It's not just me.
I know. I'm jealous. I'm so jealous.
Well, and they're all a lot younger than us, Crispy. This is the next generation of influencers.
I know. Yeah, but I'm like fast. I'm like, I got to push this button. Hold on. I got to like these guys. Like I went on one of their streams. It was like a well-oiled machine. I thought it was on Oprah. And it was like ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. There's people in the background talking. Like, who the hell's that voice? The green.
They have a producer.
They have a producer. You would think there's somebody there going like they're pointing in different directions. It's moving pretty quick. It was good though. It was really good. I think very well produced.
Little production value goes a long way. It really does.
Oh, you tell me now, right?
Wait, you guys have it as well. Whether it's the showmanship from this guy or just the raw data science from you, having a stream that actually matches the title, I personally find is one of my big driving factors. Because when I was getting into crypto stuff back in 2022, I was always looking for information, and I kind of got a little annoyed with. It felt like a lot of the streams that I was trying to tune into, it was either like very rambly, very all over the place, or it was just kind of clickbait, which is like they said they were going to talk about one thing, but then like never got to it.
Yeah.
So that's what we
very little substance behind them. Goddamn Richard. I know he can't. For whatever reason, I don't know he can't or whatever. But I really wish he was streaming. I mean, I do like watching your stuff, and I'm watching the stuff within our community. I watch Fast Abdul when I catch him. I watch some of the other shows out there. Shout out to Crypto 7. I want to make sure Crypto 7 knows that I'm watching. I'm watching all the time. I even post, and he doesn't. I am upset. He doesn't acknowledge me sometimes when I post. But besides that, I am watching all these things. But everything outside of here, man, I don't listen to any of those guys. I used to. There were maybe a half a dozen. The only one that I'll really listen to once in a while now. Well, there's 2 of them. CTO Larson. I don't know if you ever heard CTO. But he's talking about Bitcoin a lot. So I'll listen to him because he's really good on the overall Bitcoin thing. And then if I can put aside my anger at Bob Lucas, I'll watch Bob.
Why do you have beef with Bob?
Well, because I pitched to him and his followers Hex, and they lambasted me. So I haven't given up. But because what I can't stand about all this crap is the hypocrisy. I mean, I'm willing to accept the real criticism for sure about cryptos and our cryptos and what we like and don't like. But don't tell me your thing has value and mine doesn't just because you think so. I mean, come on, let's go a little bit further like that. I mean, what if everybody tried to sell? Well, what if everybody tried to sell Bitcoin? What do you think's going to happen? I watch it, right? These guys take it in the shorts, right? Literally, right? So I mean, you go back and forth. Well, it can't have value. It can have value if people believe in it. You want to argue about the merits of other parts of it. Sure, I like that. I think that's good. But I think just sometimes the hypocrisy is they just don't want to talk about something because it's not something they're interested in, right? And even if they were honest about that, that would be better. At least Richard, when he was doing, he said, I'm going to talk about other stuff because I don't want to lead people there. That I would take better than some bullshit line about how Hex is a Ponzi. Well, you know what? I'm pretty sure Bitcoin's a Ponzi. I haven't seen anything yet that's come out of it other than that.
All of them are.
Right, exactly. And this kind of goes back to your point. It's like when I finally went to college and I went to the macro and the micro classes and I came out and I was like, you mean all this shit's made up? All of it? That was I had to like roll that back and forget it because otherwise you go nuts, right? You can't live your life realize that everything's a lie, right? Because you do that. I mean, you can know it, but you got to compartmentalize it.
It's like the uncanny valley of understanding about modern monetary theory and the uncanny valley, which is like it starts off really sharp and you're like, all right, cool, I know how money works. And then you start taking those first econ classes and you're like, I know absolutely nothing. This is all terrible. But then eventually you just keep going on further and further and you're like, okay, I can get the bigger picture. We can understand how to make it work while also understanding it can collapse horrifically.
Yeah, it can. And, I think one of the favorite things that I've heard, RG probably didn't come up with this himself, but maybe he did. But the whole idea about, really the status quo is backed by guns, and we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But I mean, those with the power are in control. And Rush, you're right. It's always been this way. So it's just when I was young and dumb and I needed to just worry about how I was going to make it through the next day at work. I did not, maybe I should have, but I didn't have the time, didn't have the bandwidth to be worried about, all of these issues, these, how was life going to run, right? Like I wasn't rich. I wasn't, I was lucky I could pay my bills. So, raising a young family and all that, right? So I was more concerned about getting through the next day, not monetary policy, right? Or how it works. Because it didn't change anything, right? It didn't change life for me if whether or not this is all true or not. But.
Exactly. To quote our co-host Will, it's all just campfire stories at the end of the day, unless you can actually control it.
Yeah, they sure are. And if you're only staying for the night and leaving, it's a lot of the end story doesn't matter anymore, right? You just passing through.
I appreciate. Go for it.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say I appreciate you guys saying that DGen Roundtable and like people like myself are the next future, but we're even struggling with some of them youngins because none of us over there are under the age of 30.
Yeah, well, Fast Abdul said that. I didn't say that. You guys.
All right.
It's 30 sounds pretty young to me. Anybody under 35 is beautiful.
Yeah, 30.
Young.
I got six kids your age. Come on. Right?
Now there's that, but like I feel pretty old myself. I'm already doing VA appointments trying to get like a disability rating, and I'm like, wow, time's really catching up with me, man.
Yeah, it starts to pile. Well, I see we didn't have any major questions come up.
We had a good question. It was from Just Live earlier. I believe he asked. He said, "I sold my old I sold my old bike as a Honda. What are the odds of me getting a new Ducati?" Rhetorical question, of course.
Yeah, rhetorical.
Oh,
yeah.
It depends what you're in. If you're in some of the stuff we've been talking about.
I'm shaking the magic 8 ball. Chances are good. Chances are good. Hey, that's what we need. We need magic 8 ball on PulseChain. Somebody make that.
Yeah, could be done.
Yeah, magic 8 ball. All right, let's see. I'm looking in here, see who else we got before we wrap up. Uptober or Rectober? What do you think? I say Uptober.
Uptober. Well, tell you what, how about we actually do the math on it?
1 + 1 is 3. Up. Yep.
True. All right. So October. We started, or how about this? Bitcoin started October at 63,333. Are we going to finish on November 1st higher or lower than that? I think there will be a good chunk of the month where we will be much higher than that. However, I personally am also a 60-day cycle guy, and what the cycles are telling me right now is that there's theoretically is going to be a cycle low sometime around November 7th. That's about day 60 as it stands right now. It's possible it could end shorter and then bounce back up. It's possible we could also get an extended cycle and maybe last 2 weeks longer so that we don't hit that full like downswing of the cycle before the end of the month hits.
So you're saying there's a chance?
I'm saying there's a pretty good chance, but at the same time, I think that the chart might deceive you, especially if you just look at the raw number of like October 1st, October 31st. If you shift your dates a little bit either way, I think you might get a very different result. Just because we just had a recent high of Bitcoin on September 28th at 66,600. The old devil's number there, kind of. So that's already a pretty high point in that cycle, which means that we're starting the beginning of October relatively high, and if the cycle dips, which it already has, it's either going to rebound to a new higher cycle high. It's somewhere past, oh shoot, what day are we on? We are on day, we're on day 33 right now. So if we do make a new high after that, there's a good chance we're going to run longer, just because for the folks that don't know, the Bob Lucas 60-day cycles, some of the general rules are that if you have your cycle high past day 30, it's probably going to go longer than 60 days. If you have your high earlier than day 30, it's probably going to go shorter than 60 days. So right now, our cycle high is shorter than 30 days as it stands right now. If we beat that, we're probably going to go longer. If we don't, we go shorter. So what that means when it lines up at the end of the month is that because day 60 is on November 7th, it means that the week before that, we're probably going down. But overall, prices are probably going to be good, and I anticipate, I hope anyways, that we're going to start to recover some of these higher levels for Bitcoin, which is hopefully going to drag the rest of the market up with it, and then hopefully get Ethereum out of the dumps, which it has definitely been lately.
Yeah. It's funny how you describe that. We do a whole another hour talking about these things for sure. Well, because you know what, I see it as I don't see anything down in the dumps. So from my viewpoint on the numbers I'm looking at, but what I'm looking at are, I'm looking at 12 years, I'm looking at, very high, way back out kind of view, very high level, 50,000 foot view. And in particular with this cycle, I see Bitcoin following the right path. I do see Ethereum lagging. Right. And so when I say Bitcoin following the right path, I see it up above its 350-day moving average. I think that's where it is right now, anyways. But certainly above the 111-day moving average, moving in what I consider to be a positive direction, which rhymes very much with the previous cycles. I see Ethereum is lagging, but I attribute a lot of that to the ETFs, but what do I know, right? Don't know. So we'll just have to wait until it plays out. But even somebody asked me today, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen with with Hex? Are we going to see a retracement? I looked at it. Yeah, I think don't nobody get mad at me, but it could come down to a penny. It would be healthy. I don't want it to come down to a penny, but it's pretty healthy, right? When we talk about volatility being in the game, it goes up and it goes down. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that it stays flat or only goes up. So
it's true. The retracement definitely makes sense. I talked about this with Jay on our Sunday show. One of the typical or a very popular retracement strategy or structure, is that you go down to the 0.618 Fibonacci level. So we had that high at about, was that 1.9 pennies, which means that if we go down to the 618 level, that's 1.3 pennies. There's also a decent little level of support right here at about 1.4 pennies. So this is a very healthy pullback range, honestly. It's entirely possible, too, that we've already made that pullback with this wick low at about 1.38.
Yeah, you're really getting into it, too.
Yeah, it's possible to dip a little bit lower, but anything we're seeing right now is totally healthy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the structure's not broken. I mean, people could argue maybe there, we got some sort of a buy the rumor, sell the news event, and perhaps we do. But again, when I'm looking at the longer term, I'm expecting all this, right? It's hard though. I had to train myself. There's a lot of practice goes into this to not get all bent out of shape every time we saw big changes. So you really have to. You never hear somebody say you got to believe in the process, Zenith. You got to believe in the process, right? Well, that's kind of, I mean, if I don't know what you're doing in crypto, if you don't believe in crypto, right? Going up into the right in the first place, because otherwise it really is going to drive you nuts. And
Oh yeah.
so I don't know. This is the way I think about it. I've already bought into the idea that we're going up into the right over time with stored value. So all these are little stops along the way, right? And maybe in the end I'll be wrong. I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, if I had followed this process, I did follow it for 17 on, but I mean, if I'd been in early and followed this process, we'd be doing great, you know. So
sure.
it'd be like Bitcoin is 60K. You guys are complaining. What are you talking about? I bought it for $1. What are you gonna do? You're complaining about $60,000 Bitcoin? Come on, get out of here. Why don't you sell
sure.
and get out?
Some of the news articles that we've covered over on our channel is talking about stuff like larger TradFi executives. I think it was like Kathy Woods or something. Was like, yeah, by 2028 we expect Bitcoin to be over $500,000, maybe even $750,000. It's like, if that is not the higher. Yeah. It might be actually. If that's not the zoom out mentality, then I don't know what else is. Because other than that, we're just, even the daily is like the lowest you should go for the charts if you are staring at charts. Yep. And also, if you are staring at charts, I would also recommend touching grass every once in a while, as hard as it is for us to do. I'm guilty of it myself, but yeah, zoom out, man.
Well, and one of the things when we're looking at this stuff is, you have to understand that there's going to be people saying big, huge numbers like $1 million Bitcoin. Doesn't mean it's going to happen in the near term. Just saying long term, right? But it helps them if you buy so they can trade the cycle.
Russ, when's $6 pulse? Oh gosh, maybe 3 or 4 cycles from now.
I guarantee 2039.
How many cycles away is that? That's so 2025 is this cycle. 29 is the next one. 33, 37, 39 should be the bear market of the 5th cycle coming up.
Yeah. Look at those. I like those bubbles.
Yeah, this is a new site that Falcon Crypto in the chat just DM'd to me.
Oh, is that what he was talking about? Hey,
yeah.
Hey, thanks. Hey, thanks, Falcon. I was just gonna not answer you.
Looks like it's still in development, but like he's got top 100, next 100, and then RH core tokens with like crypto bubbles here. So you can see it's kind of a red day for RH tokens right now, except for eHedron apparently. But this is a cool tool because often PulseChain tokens are left off these kind of lists, right? So to have our own, I know it's good to zoom out and look at other ecosystems and stuff, but like, I'm definitely most interested in the things that I can see on these screens much more than what I see in the macro most days. So it's cool to be able to look.
The chat are saying scroll down on the website.
Yeah, scroll down, man. What are you doing?
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I'll press the buttons. Okay. Oh, here we go. We got a nice little chart here. Yeah.
Oh, good data.
Yeah, we got the data. What other data I got? Top 100. There we go. Yeah.
So I tried making one of these using some other software. It did not come out nearly as beautiful as this. So
this is pretty.
But that one, what I would do to try to get Falcon to do is I give him the information for it, and he can make little whales and Poseidons and make them float around, based on what they're doing with their staking behavior.
Oh, like individual wallets and like, which wallet is the biggest hex staker, etc.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's pretty wild when you see that information. Though, believe it or not, it's a lot. That's why you don't see all the. It's a lot of processing time depending on how the software is written. That's why you don't see all tokens on the screen at one time.
I mean, even just trying to get 100 bubbles as moving objects with real-time collisions. Yeah, that's some processing power to say the least.
Yeah, yeah, Falcon. I'm embarrassed to show you my little fish aquarium with it, so I'm not going to pull it up. But
I will say, if there was one piece of software into the space that I would love to copy, it would be Dex Screener. I like Dex Screener's view because it gives you the live feed of all the transactions in the past and will plot it on the chart for you. That is something I find extremely helpful, and I wish we had more access to.
The thing that bothers me about Dex Screener is they don't list. They only list like basically V2 pools on Fux. So there's no. You can't see anything that's on. Sorry, you can't see the Fux exchange on there. You can only see PulseX 9mm and 9-inch on there. So there's literally our second or third biggest DEX, depending on the day, is invisible on Dex Screener to all new users. So I'm trying to rectify that, but it is an issue I have with Dex Screener. We have a bunch.
Yeah, I think you need to rectify that. I think there's a backstory to that. You might have some success if you were able to pre-stage data for them. You might have better success.
I was thinking that too. Yeah.
Yeah, in a format that they can consume. So I'll give you a different complaint, a different side of things. And most people don't know this because they use Dex Screener and they just think things are going to show up, and they do. And so when something doesn't show up, they think it doesn't exist. Many of us don't realize that even PulseX has a whitelist, right? And so there are many pairs on PulseX that if you go to Dex Screener, you won't even see them. They might not even show up. Or if they do show up, they show up with no prices or no volume. And so from, a marketing point of view, not that I'm out marketing tokens, but if you think about it, somebody says to somebody, I see you guys, oh, go check out this token. You pull it up, you're like, there's no liquidity. Well, it says 0. I'm not, it has warnings.
Yeah, exactly.
You're off, right? But then you go look, and I saw this with the PTGC guys. I don't know if you guys probably heard of PTGC, the Grace currency and the UFO, and the thing's defying gravity, going to that's probably at Uranus for now, but it's past Mars, right? Whatever, it's just gone up so high. But you go try to look at those liquidities. You might not even see that liquidity show up in the info tabs on PulseX, right? Or for that matter, even see them sometimes on Dex Screener, because on PulseX, you see everything's computational power, and this will change over time. Things will get better, I'm certain. But they got to decide what's going to be whitelisted. Because not everything is created equal. So if you're tied directly with Pulse, you'll see it. If you're tied with PulseX, Hex, the number of different assets that have been whitelisted, you'll see it. But you'll find other obscure tokens that are matched up that they won't even show up there. Like I came across that because I kept asking about the Axis Fire pair that I had up, and there's like $300,000 in value. It shows up 0 everywhere. Right. And so what the hell is that about? Right. And so it leads you to this kind of thing. Anyways, I guess I'm not complaining about it. Actually, the guys from PulseX have been very, very helpful. The depths, very, very helpful. I like that. I recognize there's a lot of work to go, but all of these different systems we use, when you guys see something like on Dex Screener or Dex Tools, and it doesn't look right, you need to go. You need to use STAR, right? Stop, think, act, review. Go take a look at other information and verify it, because you could really hurt yourself by taking information at face value. It doesn't matter where it is, my site, anybody else's site, because these feeds are relying on a lot of different information coming in, and sometimes it's not 100%. You need to go verify it.
Yeah,
I think we could keep going all night, but I think we're about done. So why don't we,
2.5 hours is good.
Yeah. Maddie's going to be jealous. We did 15 more minutes, and he would allow us to go.
Perfect.
He'd be like, "You guys ruined my show."
Made it better.
So yeah, tell us, Zenith, tell us what's going on before we get out of here. Where can people find you?
Sure thing, folks. If you like me or what I talk about, you can catch me on Twitter and Instagram at ZenithDI. That stands for digital investing as opposed to crypto, because that was taken. Other than that, you can find me on the podcast or the YouTube channel that I help lead. That is the DGen Roundtable over there. I am very honored to be able to work with those guys and serve them as in the capacity that I do. And then outside of that, if Maddie mentioned it earlier, but we had a good show on Friday over on Corey Geary's channel talking about some of the legal stuff going on for Richard Hart's case coming up here at the end of the month, October 31st in New York City, Brooklyn specifically. So if you want to attend the PulseChain Tour event out there, I will be there on a panel with who I consider my legal mentor in this space. That is none other than Nuclear Herbs. And Crypto Coffee will also be on the panel as well. So if you have any questions, catch us over there. And then other than that, over on DGen Roundtable, we stream Sunday, Wednesday, Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Sunday is our flagship news show. Wednesday, we have community and or special guests. And then on Friday is the book club, which I am one of the hosts for. This next week, we are going to be covering the book The Value of Others by Orion Terabon. So Will is hosting that one, but you can catch us over there. Boys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thanks, Seth. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Mr. Fast Abdul.
Hey, so you can find me at 2phux.io. There's links to the Telegram there and Twitter and stuff like that. And watch out for our bribe protocol that will be coming out soon. Bribes for everyone.
All right. That's fantastic. Looking forward to seeing that. And of course, I'm ChrispyMan. You can find me on the old X at Hexfire.io. Or just go to hexfire.io for the website and all those free charts and public information. If you'd like to become a member, you can become a member over there and help us plan for the cycle top. So with that, I'm going to try to replicate Maddie's outro. Everybody stay good. Keep staking. What does Maddie say? Maddie says what?
DGen responsibly.
DGen responsibly. Yeah, maybe he does say that. So that's it. Let's go. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks everybody for listening, tuning in. Maddie, hope we did an okay job. Usually he starts the music first, but I gotta find his actual music.
Hold on, I got something for this. He says. PulseChain Matty Allen tokens for the PulseChain are available now. Go to blockchainmint.com and get yours today.
Today. Right? All right, guys. Thanks very much. I'm going to hit the end stream.